Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. Serbia is occupied. On October 5th, 915, according to the agreement of the Three Kingdoms military agreement, the German and Austrian armies began to attack. The Allies concentrated 1,700 heavy artillery pieces and 72 mine throwers to prepare for the Serbian army's positions. Under 2 days of artillery bombardment, 90% of the Serbian army's frontline positions were destroyed, resulting in heavy casualties. On October 7th, the right-wing Austro-Hungarian Third Army, 7 divisions in total, crossed the Drina River under the command of Austro-Hungarian Admiral Corvez shortly thereafter. The German 11th Army, 7 German divisions, under the command of German General Gowitz, also supported by the shallow water heavy gunboats of the Austro-Hungarian Danube fleet, crossed the Danube to attack Belgrade Point. However, in the rubble and almost ruined urban area of Belgrade, the remnants of Serbian troops resisted stubbornly. These remnants from almost 27 different units organized themselves and carried out a tragic battle with no support. And the arduous street fighting, street by street, every ruin, must be covered with several layers of corpses and stained with blood before the final attribution can be determined. Point Belgrade fell on October 9th under the onslaught of German and Austrian troops when the front line was tight. The Serbian Second Army, which had assembled on the Bulgarian-Serbian border in response to the Bulgarian mobilization, began to mobilize troops to reinforce the Serbian First and Third Army that responded to the German and Austrian armies. So Bulgaria entered the war on October 13th. Afterwards, the Bulgarian army, already deployed on the left and right flanks, attacked Serbia. The right wing attacked the southern Serbian Macedonia and Kosovo regions, while the left wing attacked Enis. Enis is located in the north of the Morava River Basin and the south of the Vardar River Basin, and its location is very important. Located on the way to the main transport corridor linking Greece with Central Europe, the railway linking Sofia and Istanbul also passes through here. The occupation of Enis means that the 4 countries of Germany, Austria, and Turkey are integrated into one. It can be said that the supply of German and Austrian arms to Ottoman Turkey is a long drought. At that time, Ottoman Turkey was almost alone in the Gallipoli Peninsula, Sinai, Caucasus and Mesopotamia. 2 fronts fought at the same time, busier than the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Although the Bulgarian First Army has the largest number of troops and the best equipment, it is not strong against the Serbian army, and its strength is less than half of the Bulgarian First Army. However, due to unfavorable conditions such as the main attacking area of Piro, which has a group of fortresses preset by Serbia, the bad weather caused the roads to be very muddy, the frequent fog made the visibility extremely low and other unfavorable conditions, the early progress was not fast. It was not until November 5th that the Bulgarian First Army finally occupied Enis. Compared to the slowness of the First Army, the Bulgarian Second Group performed best as a partial division. On October 16th, 1915, just 3 days after Bulgaria entered the war, the Second Army occupied the town of Vlaj, which is located in southern Serbia, due east of the Kosovo region, because it is on the Belgrade-Thessaloniki railway. One stop, the occupation of Varanj, cut off the connection between Serbia and Macedonia, and further cut off the main artery of the Allies supplying Serbia. The offensive of the Second Army was very smooth, and the momentum was broken. On October 20th, Kumanovo was captured, and on October 23rd, Skopje, the largest city in Macedonia, was captured. 1/3 of the total population of Cyprus Macedonia lives here, and it is a political, cultural, economic and academic center of Macedonia. The name of the city during the Ottoman Empire was Uskop, which was later renamed Skopje by the Serbs. October 5th, 1915, seemed to be a meeting point of fortunes, and the rest of the Balkans was not peaceful either, in which other countries, like moths to a flame, were involuntarily involved in the World War. Also on this day, King Constantine I of Greece once again dismissed Eleftherios Venizelos as Prime Minister, delaying Greece's entry into the Allied war by almost another 2 years. In terms of relatives, the British, German, and Russian royal families are all closely related by blood, which does not prevent the fighting between nations. The Prime Minister of Venezuela actively advocated joining the Entente to participate in the war from the very beginning. According to the 1913 Sejdi League Treaty, when either side was attacked by Bulgaria, the other party was obliged to participate in the war. Constantine I claimed that the attacking party was Austria-Hungary, not the Bulgaria remains neutral. In fact, Constantine I was pro-German. His wife was the sister of Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he accepted the honor of Marshal of the German Empire on August 8, 1914, when the war had just begun. On the same day, in the name of supporting Serbia, the French army as the main allied armies landed in the then neutral Greek port of Betrayal, the fourth front of the European battlefield of World War I, the Macedonian front. On this front Bulgaria almost independently supported. As soon as the French landed, they disarmed the Piralia battery and took over the entire port. Greece was not involved in the war at that time, and the Allies did so as a gross violation of Greece's neutrality. The reason for Britain's participation in the First World War was that Germany violated Belgium's neutrality through Belgium, and there is no historical data to make moral accusations against the French army. There is a direct railway from Thessaloniki to Belgrade. If the three landing French divisions from Piralia immediately attack Thessaloniki, then not only the human and material resources will support Serbia's war of resistance, but also spiritually. It will also stimulate the morale of the allied countries to share the same hatred, and it can definitely have the effect of 4 or 2. It's just that the French army stopped in Piralia and stopped inexplicably. At this time, the Bulgarian Second Army, which was attacking the Macedonia region, immediately transferred its left flank to the Salonika line to defend against possible French attacks. At the same time, Bulgaria mobilized 3 divisions from the country to the front line of Thessaloniki, so Bulgaria formed the Second Army Plain cluster in the Thessaloniki Plain, and defeated the Allies who came to capture Thessaloniki with 6 divisions, 4 divisions, 3 French divisions, 1 British division. The Bulgarian First Army captured Enice and opened up the passage for Germany and Austria to support the Ottoman Empire. Germany's main purpose has been achieved, and began to transfer its troops to the Eastern Front. Under the command of the old coach Putnik, the Serbian army was defeated without chaos. All the bridges on the Morava River on the way forward of the Bulgarian First Army were blown up by the Serbian army. It took a lot of effort to cross the 2 divisions. The same was true for the German and Austrian army. The weather and road caused the logistics to fail to keep up, affecting the delivery of force and firepower. Marshal Mackenson's 3-way joint attack plan to annihilate the Serbian army on the Kosovo Plain has become a piece of paper, but it has given Serbia a fleeting opportunity. The last major battle of the Serbian campaign in 1915 was the Battle of Kosovo. The Serbian army, with Pristina and Kosovo as its axis, prepared to defeat the allied forces one by one with the advantage of the inside point. Initially targeting the Bulgarian First Army, it attacked the Bulgarian army in the direction of Enice, northeast of Pristina, and within 2 days captured Fapril in southern Serbia. Then clockwise and right-handed to the northern group of the Bulgarian Second Army, which had already invaded Kosovo, launched a powerful blow. In Granin, the Bulgarian Second Army group northwards fought fiercely with Serbia. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. In the end, Serbia ended with more than 30,000 casualties and 200 artillery pieces captured. On November 23, the German 101st Division and the 9th Division of the Bulgarian First Army entered Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, without bloodshed. On November 25, the commander-in-chief of the Serbian army, Putnik, issued a general retreat order. The Serbian army crossed the mountains in 4 routes, retreated to the port on the coast of the Adriatic Sea in Albania, and was placed on the island of Greece by the Allied fleet. The first road starts from Kosovo Mitrovica and goes through Montenegro, Albania, Shkoda, Durrës. The second route starts from Pristina and goes through Peć, Albania, Durrës. The third route also starts from Pristina, via Prizren, Tirana, Albania, Durrës. The fourth road is the remnants of Macedonia, starting from Struga, Berat, Albania, Vlora. So Serbia violated the neutrality of the nascent small country Albania. Moreover, at that time, the Serb soldiers and civilians had to pass through the cold weather and lacked food and clothing, so they were naturally recruited from Albania. For the people of Albania, this is a group of bandits who snatched their belongings. 420,000 Serbian soldiers and civilians fled and were finally picked up from Albania by the British and French fleets. When they arrived in Greece, there were 260,000 soldiers and civilians, including 155,000 soldiers. Many people on the Greek islands suffered from excessive weakness and infectious diseases, mainly typhoid fever, and died one after another. The Serbian campaign in 1915 ended with the end of a skirmish between Bulgaria and the British Army on December 12 and the occupation of the entire Greek border during the entire battle. Bulgaria had a total of 424,375 people involved in the battle, with 37,000 casualties, including 24,000 casualties of the Second Army. The result was that Serbia killed more than 90,000 people and captured 174,000 people. Now the entire territory of Serbia is divided by Austria-Hungary and Bulgaria. They are all satisfied with the results of this time. Now they only need Bulgaria to defend the first line of Macedonia. This time, apart from the most miserable, Montenegro and Serbia occupied the whole territory. Greece is the most tragic neutral country. The two camps completely ignored Greece's neutrality and fought in Greece at will. In particular, Britain and France not only occupied Greek ports, but also forcibly used Greek islands to house the defeated Serb soldiers and civilians. PS. The update is completed today. The steamed buns are at home these days, so the update is not stable. I hope everyone will forgive me. Chapter 227 Rising Nationalism. 1. At a time when the European war situation has undergone great changes, Romania's domestic economy has continued to develop rapidly because of the European war. In fact, the economic development of other European countries that are still not involved in the war is not bad, but Romania is too prominent. Under the general growth rate of 6% to 15% in other neutral countries in Europe, Romania's growth rate of over 20% is extremely eye-catching. However, the main reason is that Romania can provide enough necessities for the military and people's livelihood of surrounding countries. The food, oil, vehicles, etc. needed by Germany and Austria, and the daily necessities, vehicles, fuel, etc. needed by Russia. Even after Russia captured Russian Poland this year, the Russian ambassador Ferolowski took the British and French ambassadors to visit Prime Minister Briceanu. When talking with the Prime Minister, the Russian ambassador strongly hinted that he hoped Romania would sell a batch of arms and are willing to increase the current price by another 20%. However, Prime Minister Briceanu did not dare to make hasty decisions. He delayed the export of arms to Russia on the grounds that Romania's neutrality requires careful consideration. This matter will eventually need to be handled by Edel. However, it can be seen from here that the Russians' military materials are almost bottoming out, and even Romania, which rarely exports arms from neutrality, has also paid attention. In fact, several consecutive defeats caused heavy losses to Russia, and a large number of soldiers were captured. A large amount of weapons and ammunition were also captured along with the soldiers, which made the Russian army, which was not ready by birth, even worse. Now the Russian government cannot even guarantee the supply of rifles for the soldiers. A large number of supplementary soldiers on the front line have no weapons yet, and they need to share the same weapon with their comrades. And what is even more frightening is that the Russian government has shortened the training period for newly recruited soldiers from the already short 6-week limit to 4 weeks. The recruits after the compressed training period cannot even complete the rifle shooting well, let alone simple tactical training. So the chances of these recruits surviving on the battlefield can be imagined. But who made Russia lose too much on the battlefield? Russia has lost more than 1 million people in the war for a year. Now the Russian government can only supplement the losses encountered by the army by compressing the training period. Now Edel has no plans to give up neutrality, even if he is ready to let Romania join the Allies. It will not affect the allied countries' perception of Romania for this small profit. You must know that Romania is now surrounded by the allied countries on 3 sides at the same time. He is not interested in the Russian proposal now, and now there is one trouble in Romania that is really bothering him. Romania has developed well in recent years. There is a voice in Romanian society. Now the Kingdom of Romania has become stronger, so the kingdom needs to protect every Romanian from harm. Simply put, Romania is strong and nationalist sentiment has expanded. Trend point. But the organization that made this sound was called the Patriotic Youth Association, which was originally founded by a few fanatical patriotic students on campus. However, with its radical slogans, Romania needs Transylvania in Austria-Hungary and Bessarabia in Russia, it also attracts a lot of radical nationalists to join. But in the mainstream of society, this kind of radical proposition is very dissatisfied, and most people in Romania don't really agree with it. Because most people are very sensible about Austria-Hungary and Russia occupying the Romanian settlement, and also know that Romania's national strength cannot provoke any of them. It's just that Romania's economic development is accelerating now, and the most important thing is that the neighboring Austria-Hungary and Russia are caught in a war, which makes the idea of the IPA become attractive again. And more people are slowly accepting the views of this small organization. Gradually this small party became more and more prominent in Romania, and finally caught Edda's attention. Edda is wary of the radical party's slogans, because no one but him would know that Austria-Hungary would disintegrate, Russia would change its color, and that both European powers would fall in this war. The prevailing view now is that one side will be defeated and withdraw from the war, and one side will win. So in this case, Edel thinks the slogan of the IPA is suspicious and needs to send someone to investigate. Soon the captain of the guard, Karist, put the information about the preliminary investigation of the IPA on Edel's desk. In this report, Karist introduced the situation of the patriotic YMCA in detail, from the initial development in the middle to the current big development. The patriotic YMCA was originally established at the University of Iași. Although this university, established in 1832, is not the most famous university in Romania, it has also produced many famous people. At present, several main backbones of the Patriotic Youth Association, the chairman of the Youth Association, Yang Uskov, the chairman of the board, Bastimi, etc., are all people who graduated from this school. According to the survey data, since the establishment of Iași University, the Patriotic YMCA has been focusing on local development, and only a small part of its energy is devoted to recruiting members in the school. It seems that the high-level thinking of the YMCA is very clear, knowing that students are easily hurting themselves with double-edged swords, and this situation continued until the outbreak of World War I. Since the outbreak of the First World War, the development speed of the YMCA has risen to a high level, rapidly increasing from more than 10,000 people before the war to 30,000 people, but at this time the development of the YMCA is still within the scope of Edel's approval. It's just that the development momentum of the YMCA in Romania at the beginning of this year has become very strange. They have published a lot of their opinions in the newspapers, and they have begun to hold rallies in various cities to promote their views, and the senior leaders of the YMCA are also frequently speaking in various cities. Edel could see at a glance that this was a master of propaganda promoting the youth association. Moreover, the activities of the Al-Shabaab have been frequent this year, and the cost is beyond the reach of Al-Shabaab, which only needs to collect membership fees. This is what Edda is most worried about. How scary a militant group that is funded by external forces is beyond what these people can imagine now. Therefore, Edel asked Karist to find out the financial master behind him. Whether he was a domestic person or a foreign institution, he could not let Edel relax his investigation. After days of investigation, Edel was a little dumbfounded when Karist put the report on his desk. The YMCA is not being funded by a foreign power, but by people from both the Allied and Allied powers that are heavily funding its development. Edel thought about it carefully and knew why this organization was so popular with both parties. The slogan of the YMCA is that the Kingdom of Romania needs to protect every Romanian from persecution. There are still a large number of Romanian people living in Transylvania in Austria-Hungary and Bessarabia in Russia, and the Romanian people belong to the majority in both regions. Then, after the Al-Shabaab organization expands, it must meet the requirements of its members. At this time, Romania must choose between the two camps. This is a reason why both sides are funding a radical political party. They want to stir up the national sentiment in Romania. Let the Kingdom of Romania have to choose sides. Chapter 228 Rising National Sentiment, Part 2. The reason for both sides to do this is that Romania's power is growing too fast, and in the Balkans, only Romania is not affected by the war. Neutral Albania and Greece are completely ignored by the big powers. Now both the Allies and the Allies feel that it is a bit too presumptuous for Romania to earn their hard-earned money in such a neutral and happy manner when they are fighting to the death. So they are ready to let Romania choose between the two camps. In fact, on the Allied side, Russia lost a lot of territory and troops on the battlefield after several battles this year. Now Russia's position on the Eastern Front has been crumbling, and it urgently needs time to reorganize and replenish its troops. The failure of Britain and France in the Battle of the Dardanelles made it impossible for Russia to obtain the much needed material in a short period of time. Therefore, only 10 million people can share the pressure of Russia, and Romania, which has a very good military strength point on the Allied side. The grain and oil exported by Romania were indispensable materials for Germany and Austria. After 2 years of purchases, both Germany and Austria felt the financial pressure of purchasing these materials, so the two countries took advantage of the favorable opportunity after Bulgaria joined the camp to force Romania to make a choice. Of course, they know that Romania is impossible from the government level, so they also think of starting from the private sector, and the radical YMCA is also their choice point. As for the slogan of the youth association, it is nothing to the two camps. They can completely let Romania get the other party's territory first. As for the territory claimed by Romania in their own country, they need to talk about it after the war. But at that time, according to the strength of both sides, I believe the Romanians would give up this idea point. So now the radical slogan of the youth party is only superficial. In fact, Romania is facing the pressure of the two camps to make a statement. As the Romanian controller, Edel will usher in the most difficult moment. Now, though, he needs to appease the top Al-Shabaab first. And according to the latest information from Karist, a man named Karl Morley became the publicity minister of the Youth Association at the beginning of the year, and he was the main contributor to the fact that the Youth Association has grown to 150,000 members. Therefore, Ed especially summoned Jan Uskov, the chairman of the Youth Association, and Karol Morley, a publicity expert, in the palace. Eder intends to let the Youth Association slow down the trajectory of development during this period and give Romania a little more time to prepare. The chairman of the YMCA, Jan Uskov, and its propaganda minister, Karol Morley, all arrived as scheduled. The chairman of the Youth Association, Jan Uskov, is a man wearing glasses, with a flying appearance and a little bit of glittering eyes. It can be seen from his eyes that this person has a lot of ambition. For such an ambitious person, Edel does not know how much he has dealt with throughout the year. So he thinks it is easy to deal with Jan Uskov. He just needs to give him a certain amount of power, and propaganda minister Karol Morley looks a little suave. However, when he saw Edel, his whole person had a fanatical atmosphere, as if facing God. However, from the information given by the captain of the guard, this Karol Morley is a fanatical Romanianist. For Edel's fanaticism, he just thinks that Romania wants to win the above mentioned areas, and it is best to be led by the king. It seems that Karol Morley is the best target for this meeting. In fact, Edel thinks that Karol Morley is the most troublesome object, because in his heart he valued his ideals the most, and wanting him to suspend his ideals would give Edel a headache. Fortunately, Jan Uskov should be able to play some role in helping him persuade the fanatical Grand Romanian. Good afternoon, both of you. Looking at the two main figures of the YMCA in front of me, Edel was the first to say hello. I have seen your majesty. Facing the king's greeting, the two still meticulously completed the court etiquette. This is not only their respect for the Romanian monarchy, but also the respect for Edel, who has made Romania's economy develop greatly over the years. This time I have summoned two young talents from the Youth Association. Edel, who was only 26 years old this year, continued to say to the two who were a few years older than him,
It's because I have a small request. Point, Your Majesty. Please speak. Point facing Edel's request. The two of them can only respond first. Point Edel didn't care whether the two of them had any extra thoughts and only talked about himself. I need your youth association to not be too radical recently. The domestic public opinion is too floating, which is not in line with the current situation in Romania. You can't add fuel to the fire now. Romania does not currently have this plan. Point, of course Edel can't tell the two of his plans. Who knows if the two will say it. He can't even tell his confidant, Prezhan, but it is estimated that the chief of staff can guess that the king has ideas about this war, but he doesn't know which camp he needs to join. Therefore, Edel can only comfort the two people in front of them first. As for the truth, it is impossible to tell them the truth. Point after hearing the king's words, the chairman of the YMCA, Januskov, did not speak, and the propaganda minister Karol Morley was indeed a fanatical Romanianist. He immediately told Edel about the current situation. Point, Your Majesty, we Romania are now in a very favorable position. No matter which faction we join, we can get half of the Romanian settlement. We can't give up this good opportunity, or we won't have this good opportunity in the future. Point hearing Karol Morley's words, Edel looked at him a little helplessly, and the fanatical nationalist would jump out immediately. He had to continue to persuade Morley. Now do you know who can win the final winner of the two camps? In the face of Edel's question, Karol Morley was speechless at once, but he responded quickly and spoke immediately. As long as our 10 million Romanians are united, Transylvania and Bessarabia will be brought back to the Romanian family. Then we will have at least 16 million Romanians. It will be a ray power that neither camp can underestimate. Point hearing Karol Morley's invincible words, Edel suddenly hated him. Regardless of the strength of the two sides, they only pay attention to the power of the spirit. The spirit can block bullets or solve the people's living items. Edel, who was no longer in charge of the YMCA's propaganda chief, found that inviting the zealous nationalist was entirely self-inflicted. Turning to the president of the YMCA, Jan Uskov, Mr. Uskov, I think the YMCA should pay more attention to its work in the national parliament and not in the streets. Do you think so? In the face of Edel's request, Jan Uskov said, after thinking about it, Your Majesty, you are right. Now this situation needs to be improved to a certain extent, but no one in our organization has ever served in the parliament, and many people in our society do not understand this very well. Edel interrupted Januskov. I believe that Your Excellency the chairman can persuade the people in your society. It was said that Edel stared at the chairman of the youth association after the game. Januskov also played politics for a long time. Knowing that this was the king's last warning, out of scruples about Edel's high status in Romania, he said, arrive. Of course we will appease the internal affairs. Please give us a little time. Half a month should be enough. I think Your Excellency should have a bigger role in the parliament. The vice president is a good seat. In the face of Edel's pressing step by step, while not forgetting to give himself a sweet date, Januskov had no choice but to talk about it. Thanks to His Majesty for your interest in our YMCA. We will definitely make more domestic proposals for Romania. As a result, the most radical youth association in Romania was suppressed by Edel with prestige. But he knew that this only solved the superficial problem, and the root cause was not solved. Chapter 229 Rising Nationalism, Part 2. Edel temporarily solves the problem of the YMCA. It's just the problem that needs to be solved by him now. The two camps do everything possible to force Romania to participate in the war. This is the most urgent thing for him at present. Edel was a little confused as to why the two camps persecuted Romania so much. In the history of the previous life, Edel seemed to remember that in World War I, except for Belgium and Greece, there was no country that was persecuted by both sides at the same time. So why is Romania like this? Is the position too critical, or some other reason, so that both sides are targeting Romania? Edel does not know the reason, but in fact, there is a deep understanding of Romania in London, Paris and Berlin. That is, Romania wants to speculate in this war. In fact, there are many countries that want to speculate, but Romania has seized a lot of interests by virtue of its position and export advantages. This makes the big countries that are still fighting to the death very uncomfortable.
Co-authoring. We are fighting to death for profit. You can watch the fun and even eat a little secretly while we are not paying attention. The most important thing is that Romania's size is completely incomparable to the foreign powers. Even Italy, the weakest of the powers, has twice the economic output of Romania, not to mention Romania's population point, which European power has a population of less than 25 million. So Romania, which seems to be a lot in other countries, has a population of 10 million, but it is actually far from reaching the standard. So in Eda's mind, both Transylvania and Bessarabia are the cornerstones of Romania's becoming a great power. In addition, Romania can seize territory from Austria-Hungary and Russia, which have been chaotic in recent years. So in Eda's view, it is completely impossible for Eda to become a big country with a population of less than 25 million. And Eda also prepared in this way. Therefore, Romania's behavior among several small neutral countries is very prominent. It only takes a discerning person to see that Romania's armament preparation is different from other countries. Other countries don't pay as much attention to the military as Romania, and even joining the war is a model for the standing army to supplement the militia. In fact, the main reason is that the number of infantrymen with guns has increased, while the expansion of equipment such as artillery and machine guns has not been so much. Romania is completely different. It is completely an expansion of the military establishment, and its technical arms and equipment are all upgraded together. Moreover, the news of Romania's military expansion cannot be concealed, and other countries are uneasy about the expansion of Romania's standing army to more than 400,000. Many related countries have secretly calculated that Romania invested 1/3 of its profits in the war into the army. This is not the performance of a neutral country, it is more like preparation before speculation. Edel hadn't figured it out at first, and it was only in the office that he figured it out. Edel, who fully understood, laughed at himself helplessly. I didn't expect to expose my thoughts like this. This is a lesson for Edel. Let him not think that understanding the general trend of the world can make the most favorable choice. Other countries are not fools, and will respond naturally, based on Romania's response point. But now he needs to get the two sides, to eliminate attention to Romania. Then it is better to have other things, to divert attention to Romania, but this can only temporarily alleviate the situation. It is not an easy task, to get the two sides, to dismiss Romania now. Now Edel can only think of a way to solve this problem, and if it doesn't work, delay time. However, Eda's own plan to enter the war in 1918, it seems that Romania may not wait for that time point, but now Edel can only let the domestic atmosphere down first. For the two camps to force the palace, first of all, he needs to keep himself out of chaos. So the day after Eda met with the YMCA executives, the Romanian media stopped focusing on promoting nationalism, and there was much less news about the oppression of Romanian people in Transylvania and Bessarabia. Instead, Romania's economic and national strength is equidistant from the comparison of various powerful countries. The media now want to tell the citizens that Romania is still weak and needs to continue to develop. The YMCA, which mainly preaches fanatical nationalism, has also recently changed its style. In its propaganda slogan, it has no longer been preached to the public, Romania must have Transylvania and Bessarabia. Instead, the slogan has been changed to ease the people's high expectations for the government. Stimulated by the news brought back by the chairman Jan Uskov, the senior leaders of the YMCA have adopted measures to stop radical actions at this stage. Of course, there are people who are not going to give up, and that is the Minister of Propaganda Karl Morley. He still has no idea of changing the table. After a night of persuasion by the senior leaders of the YMCA, it did not have the slightest effect to make him give up. Karl Morley has always stubbornly believed that the love of Romania at the top of the YMCA is not pure, but has metamorphosed into the same self-concern as other bureaucrats. The leadership of the YMCA has completely given up on letting this fanatical nationalist, but they are reluctant to give up his excellent propaganda, and can only continue to keep him in the YMCA. But it would still be inappropriate for the propaganda minister to let him do the job, so they have another candidate, the former propaganda minister Biba. And Karl Morley is still in the propaganda department, but can only be a deputy minister who does nothing. It's just that they didn't know that Karl Morley hadn't slept all night. With heavy dark circles under his eyes and a haggard face, He was sitting on the bed in his apartment drinking wine. There were several empty wine bottles on the ground, and the whole person showed a clear sense of baldness in Carol Morley's mind. The senior members of the YMCA are now rotten, and they are no different from other politicians. They are all political creatures fighting for power and profit. And Morley is the ideal of the Romanians wholeheartedly, but he is not a fool, knowing that his own opposition has no effect. Even though he had been against it yesterday, the senior leaders of the YMCA who were fascinated by the seats in the parliament quickly reached an agreement. It will stop the propaganda of nationalism, and it will also help the government to suppress the desire of the people for unity. Now Carol Morley is confused and doesn't know why His Majesty Edel, whom he thought would save Romania, would reject his proposal. This made him feel that the whole person was very bad, and he needed to think hard about whether his previous decision was correct. Of course, the scope of his thinking is only whether it is appropriate to place hope on other people. Carol Morley does not think that his goals are also a problem. There is no problem with the purpose, only the means seem to need to be adjusted. However, when Carol Morley didn't think about a new way out, he didn't plan to leave here. Now he still needs the strength of the Youth Association. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 Invisible Expansion 1. Carl Morley, a nobody, Edel forgot after summoning him. There are so many things he needs to deal with every day. Where is he in the mood to take care of him? After temporarily suppressing the possibility of the outbreak of nationalism in the country, Edel immediately recruited the chief of the general staff, Prezhan. He intends to stop after the expansion of the existing Romanian army, which is now too conspicuous. He intends to combine the experience of Germany and the Soviet Union after World War I and the previous life to carry out invisible military expansion. Hans von Sickert, the founder of the post-war German army of 100,000 people, is only now serving as chief of staff of the newly formed 11th Army. Its army commander was the well-known General August von Mackensen. In 1915, the newly formed 11th Army performed quite well. They took over 250,000 prisoners when they took Lemberg at the end of June, then took Warsaw on August 4, 1914, and the Brest-Litovsk fortress at the end of August. Under their leadership, the 11th Army advanced a total of 300 kilometers, and by the end of September, the Polish salient was completely removed, and the Russian army's threat to Galicia was completely relieved. Von Sickert leapfrogged to brigadier general, and his boss Mackensen received the rank of field marshal. At the same time they were transferred to the newly formed army Mackensen, and then they continued to fight in Serbia. Of course, the Serbs could not resist the German, Austrian, and Bulgarian coalition forces. At the end of November, all Serbian troops were either wiped out or fled to Albania and Greece. A total of 150,000 prisoners were taken, and von Sickert was awarded the Order of Valor with Oak Leaf. Now they are in Bulgaria, ready to attack the Allied forces entrenched in Piralia. Facing the mobile warfare master Marshal Mackensen, Edel also asked Pilishin for his opinion. His Excellency the Chief of the General Staff praised it, and believed that no general in the Romanian army was his opponent in mobile operations, including him. This is one of the reasons why Edel is reluctant to declare war too early. Now the German Eastern Front is full of talented people, and generals such as Hindenburg, Ludendorff, and Mackensen are the main driving forces behind the collapse of Russia in Germany's fight on the Eastern Front. And Romania's terrain determines that only mobile warfare can be fought, so Edel is also in trouble in the face of mobile warfare master Marshal Mackensen. Therefore, Edel has to conceal his goals, continue to be neutral in the two camps, and at the same time, try to eliminate the two sides' vigilance against Romania. Not to expand the establishment and strength is the best way that Edel can get along at the moment. However, Sickert's stealth expansion plan for Germany was too time consuming, and Edel combined some of the practices of later Soviet troops in a unit. Its combat effectiveness is affected by weapons and equipment, personnel training level, and commander's ability. Among them, the commander's ability is high and low, and Edda's idea from the later Soviet army is to add a deputy to each level of military unit. A new deputy division commander was added at the division level, a deputy brigade commander was added at the brigade level, and a deputy squad leader was also added at the class level. The staff also followed this approach point as for the effect, what he saw in the text of the stall in his previous life. He felt that there was some truth to it, so he used it. Such a Romanian army division can be divided into 2 complete command systems from top to bottom overnight. Because they are all divided into a command system of a division, the officers at the top and bottom all know each other, which can minimize the weakening of the command ability. However, after solving the problem of command, training and weapons and equipment, Edel could only discuss with the chief of staff. He wanted to make some effort from the militia, so he needed the reasonable advice of Admiral Pilishin, and it was estimated that he also needed a little advice from the Secretary of the Army. After receiving Edel's call, the 2 military bosses immediately put down their work and rushed to the palace. I have seen your majesty. Edel looked at the 2 generals, Chief of General Staff and General Courtois, Minister of the Army, who saluted him. In particular, General Courtois is 71 years old this year. His hair and beard are completely white, but his spirit is not bad. According to the news from his guards, he can handle 7 to 8 hours a day in the army department, and it seems that he still loves military life deeply. Edel took back the thoughts that had spread out and said to the 2 of them, "Let the talk come this time. I have a small military problem and need your help." After Priest and Courtois glanced at each other, they all wanted to know about the king's little problem. "Your majesty, please speak." Edel explained the preparation method for Romania's military expansion in the future, and he wanted to hear the opinions of 2 senior military personnel. As for ideas such as training and weapons and equipment, we need to wait for the change of the command system before we can talk about it. After listening to Edel's thoughts, the 2 generals remained silent. Edel didn't rush. He knew that his idea would have a great impact on the army, and it should be considered carefully. After a quarter of an hour, the 2 military bigwigs finally stood up with General Pilishin. "Your Majesty, after our careful consideration, this plan is good and will be of great help to the expansion of the command system in the future." Hearing the words of Prezhan, Edel was also very happy. He is most concerned about the expansion of the army, which can guarantee the expansion of Romania's territory in the future, and the rich Ukraine and Hungary are all under his consideration. "I have another idea." Edel took advantage of the hot iron to put his ideas on expanding the technical arms in the militia and increasing training to make them semi-professional soldiers. When Priest and Courtois heard Edel's thoughts, they were stunned. In their knowledge, no one had such a novel idea as the king. Looking at the expressions of Prezhan and Courtois, Edel couldn't help asking, "What do you 2 think of my idea?" Both of them were silent about Edda's inquiry, which made Edda, who was a little happy before, a little embarrassed. Seeing Edel's embarrassment, the confidant, Admiral Prezhan, also had eyes. "Your majesty is a matter of great importance. We need to go back and study it carefully." After seeing Prezhan helping Edda to ease the embarrassment, Admiral Courtois took over and expressed his initial judgment. According to the judgment of the old minister, according to his majesty's thoughts, the military expenditure will be greatly increased, and the effect is not as good as the expansion of the establishment. After hearing the words of Admiral Courtois, Edel glanced at Admiral Puri. However, His Excellency the Chief of Staff seemed to see something novel on the carpet, and did not notice Edel's eyes. Seeing Prezhan's performance, Edel knew that even he thought it was a costly and inefficient idea. Seeing this, Edel came up with a method that he had prepared for a long time. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 231 Invisible Expansion, Part 2. What if the government covered 70% of the cost of the militia? Is it 70% of the total cost? Yes. After understanding the conditions proposed by Edel, the 2 generals immediately changed their tune. Your Majesty, the old minister thinks that this idea is very good. It can make our country's militia reach a high level of training, and it can also quickly expand the army during wartime. It is a good way. Who said that General Courtois wouldn't be flattering. Admiral Priest is not far behind. Your Majesty, this method has a high degree of control. I will let the staff members prepare the training and equipment plan for the militia, and I will not disappoint your majesty. Seeing the attitude of the two big military bosses, Edel couldn't help laughing and crying. However, he still has to draw a boundary for Admiral Pili Mountain. Otherwise, with the thick skin of the chief of the general staff, he estimates that a whole militia heavy artillery regiment can come out. That didn't make Prime Minister Bricianu vomit blood in anger, and it was not easy for him to do work for the Prime Minister. It's all about money. To make the two military bosses flatter so hard. In the past, the military had to pay 50% of the cost of the militia, but the training funds, ammunition consumption and weapons and equipment were all paid by the military, and only the stipend was shared with the government in half. Although the military is the largest financial spender in Romania, it still needs to expand the troops, train the troops, purchase and reserve ammunition, etc., and the military expenses are also tight. Therefore, in the face of Edel's conditions, there is no reason to agree to it immediately. Chief of the General Staff, the militia plan prepared by your staff cannot exceed the equipment of 6 divisions, and heavy artillery is not allowed on the militia, which will make it difficult for the government to do it. Hearing the request drawn by Edel, Admiral Pilishan's face stiffened for a while, but he changed back immediately. Please rest assured, Your Majesty, I will not give the militia too many cutting-edge technical arms, among which the high training costs will put too much pressure on the government. After hearing the assurances of Admiral Pilishan, Edel planned to let them do it first, and he still needed to do work for the Prime Minister. Then you go and come up with the plan, and I will also ask the Prime Minister to discuss the cost. The two generals withdrew immediately after hearing Edel's words. After exiting the king's office, Admiral Courtois seemed to hear Admiral Prezan muttering to himself, "Unfortunately, I also want to prepare 2 militia heavy artillery regiments." After sending off the 2 generals, Edel called a guard and asked him to invite Prime Minister Bricianu. It is estimated that this will be another difficult consultation, but fortunately, Edel learned from the Ministry of Finance that Romania's current financial situation is not bad, and it should be able to help the army solve the difficulties. It didn't take long for Prime Minister Bricianu to come to Edel's office. I have seen Your Majesty. The Prime Minister, who is in his 40s, is in good spirits recently. The Ministry of Finance only handed over Romania's financial statements for the first 3 quarters to him 2 days ago. In the first 3 quarters of 1915, Romania's total revenue reached 947 million lei. According to the forecast of the Ministry of Finance, the total revenue will exceed 1.25 billion lei this year, and it is likely to reach the level of 1.3 billion lei. It is said that money is a man's courage, and for the Prime Minister, the head of government, money is also his confidence. Only if he knew the king was trying to beat him up. I don't know if the spirit head is still that good. Edel looked at Prime Minister Bricianu in front of him and planned to strike. Your Excellency, what is the current economic situation? Prime Minister Bricianu, who did not understand why the king asked this question, told the truth. Very good. At present Romania's economy is developing vigorously under the influence of surrounding wars. I estimate that Romania's economic growth will reach 25% this year. This way I can feel at ease. Now that Romania's economic situation is so good, a lot of credit is due to Your Excellency. Edel first praised the Prime Minister's heart and continued to guide the surrounding situation. I wonder what the Prime Minister thinks about the security situation around Romania. Prime Minister Bricianu felt strange that the king suddenly asked about the security situation in the surrounding area. Isn't this the job of the military? However, in the face of the king's question, now he can only bite the bullet and answer, Your Majesty, all the countries around us have joined the war. As the only Balkan country that has not joined the war, the security situation is not very good. But, Edel raised his hand to stop the words that the Prime Minister did not say. He only needed the Prime Minister to tell the beginning of the security situation, but he didn't want to hear the words after that. As for the neutrality of Greece and Albania, it is a joke. Both factions have fought a battle on Greek soil, so Romania is truly neutral. Yes, Your Excellency. The security situation around Romania is not very good now, and the 4 countries around us have joined the war. Edel walked to the side of map of Europe and explained. Our neighbor Serbia has been occupied by the Allies, and Austria, Hungary and Russia are fighting hard to the north.
Even our neighbor to the south, Bulgaria, has summoned 400,000 troops to join the battlefield. The surrounding situation is too tense, and our Romanian defense is under great pressure. Prime Minister Briceanu now thinks back, and thinks that it is the king who asked him to increase military spending for the military. Your Majesty, Romania's various funds are now fully arranged, and there is absolutely no other funds to give to the military. Who wouldn't cry poor? His Prime Minister Briceanu believes that he is in the top 3 in Romania, and no one can refute it. After hearing the Prime Minister cry poor, Edel waved his hand and said, "There is no need for the government to increase costs to the military." Hearing Edel's words made Prime Minister Briceanu a little confused. Tell yourself the head of the government about the security situation, and don't want the government to increase military spending. What medicine does the king sell? Looking at the bewildered Prime Minister, Edel stated his purpose. The main reason is that the training progress of the Romanian militia reserve is a little bit slower, so I want the government to help share a little bit. Hearing Edel's words, Prime Minister Briceanu became vigilant and immediately began to cry again. Our government's funding has always been arranged. Although the fiscal revenue is a little higher this year, we need to invest too much. The transportation department needs to renovate the railway before 1900, and the education department also needs to strengthen investment in basic education. And higher education is also very important for Romania. They also plan to build a new university and 5 secondary schools this year. The health department also plans to transform the medical conditions in our backward areas so that the people can get better treatment. These all need money. Now each departments are asking for money. In the mouth of Prime Minister Briceanu, he seems to be the hardest person in Romania. Okay. In the face of Prime Minister Briceanu's crying, Edel interrupted him in annoyance. He directly stated what he knew. As far as I know, Your Excellency Prime Minister, the government still has 2 payments, an emergency payment of 60 million lei, and a payment of 54 million lei from the new customs revenue, which has not been used. Yet in the face of Edel's rude words, Prime Minister Briceanu defended. Your Majesty, the emergency fund of 60 million lei cannot be easily used. With the newly arrived customs revenue of 54 million lei, we are going to open a canal between the Danube and Constanta, which will greatly benefit transportation and agriculture develop. As for the canal that Prime Minister Briceanu mentioned, Edel also knew that it was to irrigate his farmland and allow Constanta to open the river. Let the Romanian economy achieve greater development. This proposal was proposed as early as 1901, but the cost was too high, and it was shelved. Now that the fiscal revenue has increased significantly, the Prime Minister has this idea again. But now Edel can't care about this project that benefits Romania's people's livelihood. He is now preparing for the expansion of the territory. But to appease the Prime Minister, he promised, as long as you share part of the cost of the militia, you can start the canal for the rest. In the face of Edel's rare calm deliberation, Prime Minister Briceanu knew that he could not defeat the king in the end, so he asked like a bullied young daughter-in-law. So how much is needed? Not much, just 70% of the total cost of the militia. PS steamed buns are back, the 2 shifts are starting, and the minimum 2 shifts will start this month. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 232 Invisible Reorganization, Part 2. 70% of the total cost. Prime Minister Briceanu was surprised and asked the king again. Facing the Prime Minister's inquiry, Edel asked seriously. Yes, Prime Minister Briceanu did not understand the army at all, but he had studied the domestic army very seriously. This Romanian army, which is based on Germany and built by Edel, can also be ranked top in Europe. In the militia improvement plan last year, part of the cost needs to be borne by the government, and he has also carefully understood the cost of the militia. At that time, the government bore half of the militia allowances and salaries, which was not too much, and only 13 million lei, which Prime Minister Briceanu thought was still affordable. He has also learned about the investment of the army, which is probably between 30 million and 35 million lei. However, 70% of the total funding of the militia this time, that is to say, the cost of equipment and the consumption of weapons and ammunition for training, he felt that even the emergency funds would not be left for him. In the past few years as Prime Minister,
He knew too much about the habits of the senior military leaders led by General Puel, Chief of General Staff, and General Courtois, Minister of Army. They will definitely let the militia undertake some of the tasks of the army. Maybe even the militia heavy artillery regiment, the militia flying team, and the militia ship formation can do it. As if seeing the Prime Minister's voice, Edel comforted him. I've already greeted the military's top management, and heavy artillery regiments are not allowed to make them. So the cost will not be too high, just add some small caliber artillery, and the training volume will increase a little, but it won't cost much. After Edel finished speaking, he touched his nose. He felt that his nose was a little uncomfortable. Maybe someone was talking about him. However, Edel's comfort could not reassure the Prime Minister, who is in his 40s, and he still asked without giving up. Your Majesty, can you set a cap on the cost of the militia? Well, I need you to discuss it with President Admiral Courtois. After Edel finished speaking, her nose felt a little more itchy, and she wanted to sneeze. He could not tell the Prime Minister that this was to hide the formation of 6 divisions in the militia. Otherwise, the Prime Minister will resign in anger, so he can only continue to hide it. Your Majesty, if the pressure on the government is too great, the investment in people's livelihood may be insufficient, which will make the people dissatisfied. Bricianu was going to make a last-ditch effort. He was too eager to complete the canal from Cernăvăd to Constanța in office. There are now more than 300,000 refugees in Romania, and he plans to take advantage of this rare opportunity to start the construction of the canal. Only in this way can we leave a splendid stroke in Romania's history book, and at the same time, it can also bring a rich political legacy to the Bricianu family. In the face of the Prime Minister's pleading, Edel intends to analyze the situation for him from a security point of view. Your Excellency Prime Minister, you must know that Romania's defense is under too much pressure now, and we cannot guarantee when it will be attacked. Therefore, a strong enough army can ensure the safety of the people, and I believe they will understand. And you also know that our the neighbors all have strong armies, and it is irresponsible to the people of the kingdom if they are not prepared in advance. In order to scare the Prime Minister, Edel even brought out the 400,000 troops mobilized by Bulgaria, completely disregarding the fact that even Romania's standing army has exceeded 400,000, and if the militia is included, it will exceed 800,000. Regardless of the Prime Minister's explanation, Edel insisted that the government should bear 70% of the cost of the militia. The once angry Prime Minister Bricianu wanted to resign, but he was reluctant to take this position. But the results were good, and Edel finally agreed that the Prime Minister would not let the government pay for other military costs. And in peacetime, the cost of the military can only be maintained at the current proportion of total fiscal revenue. After Edel sent Prime Minister Bricianu away, he sighed deeply. This was the most difficult condition he had ever discussed with the Prime Minister. It was only at this time that Edel discovered that the lights were on, and he and the Prime Minister talked about it all afternoon, but finally got the Prime Minister to agree. Edel knew in his heart that, even though Prime Minister Bricianu agreed to this condition, it was estimated that it was the last time he made concessions. If there is another time, the stubborn Prime Minister will definitely resign. Now Edel can't find a more capable official to replace him than the current Prime Minister, so he still needs to appease Prime Minister Bricianu. Perhaps a royal knight medal can comfort the Prime Minister a little. After the government agreed to cover 70% of the total cost of the militia, Generals Prayment and Courtois acted quickly. It took them 3 days to come up with a new training plan for the militia, and now they put the plan on Edel's desk. The 2 generals, both in their 120s and over, stood upright in the king's office, and even the 71-year-old white-haired General Courtois stood like a benchmark. Edel picked up the plan, ignoring the 2 admirals standing upright. Because Edel got news at the War Department, Prime Minister Bricianu and the 2 generals had a big fight over this plan. The military's new militia reorganization plan has spent the only 2 funds in the Prime Minister's hand, and there is nothing left. The angry Prime Minister ran to the army and had a big fight. However, only 3 people were present during the quarrel, and the others were completely inaccessible, so no one could know exactly what they quarreled about. And Edel has Calist's intelligence network, so he knows this very well. He looked at the plan and was speechless to the 2 generals. This was too obvious. No wonder the Prime Minister ran to have a big fight point in this program. The Romanian military sent 6 active duty regiments to train the militias. And there are also a large number of active duty deputy officers who were sent to the militia near the 6 regiments as instructors. Among them, officers at all levels are responsible for selecting the number of corresponding positions from the militia to focus on training, and the rest are still the same point. And in this plan, they directly provided the militia with the establishment of 6 artillery regiments, and they have already placed an order with the arsenal. The militia artillery units it trains train alone for half a year, and jointly train with other artillery companies for half a year. The main thing is how to look at it. The joint training is a complete active artillery regiment, and even the weapons and equipment are the same point. Edel was also quite speechless about the army plan, which is not just telling the Prime Minister to train 6 active duty divisions. This made Edel very sad, for fear that the Prime Minister was angry, but really wanted to resign. That's why he asked 2 high-ranking generals to stand up in front of him as a way to give the Prime Minister an outlet point, but Edel completely forgot that it was actually him. From reading the entire plan, it can be seen that it is just a gesture without changing a word. Point after reading it, Edel said to the 2 generals in front of him, "This plan, I think that's it. Next time you have a big fight with the Prime Minister like this, I will definitely ask you to go back and do it more than 3 times." After speaking, Edel brushed on the plan and signed his name. This represented the beginning of Romania's last military expansion before entering the war. PS. Steam buns are updated. Are you afraid? Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 233 1915 at the end of the year. Time passed in a hurry, and 1915 also came to the end of the year. However, there is still no sign of the war in Europe being settled, and all the participating countries are preparing for the coming year. The 2 camps of the Entente and the Allies both see next year as the year to decide the outcome. Especially the Allies camp, because Romania provides them with the necessary daily necessities and military supplies, so the German army has performed more strongly this year. However, this strength is also rapidly consuming its domestic wealth. In the 1.5 years after the war, the materials purchased from Romania alone reached 2.43 billion marks. Now Romania is the largest importer of Germany and Austria. With such a high import value, a lot of wealth from Germany and Austria-Hungary was transferred to Romania, and Romania's economy was prosperous now. As long as there is money, a person can make money, and this is basically the production of materials needed by the allied countries with the flow. Now, as much as Romania produces, the allies can purchase as much as possible, and there is no need to worry about sales. Those rich and powerful German and Austrian businessmen waived their checks to buy in Romania, so now the Romanian economy is completely supported by German and Austrian purchases. As for Russia on the other side, I'm sorry that Russia has no financial resources to purchase large-scale purchases from Romania. Just picking up important material purchases, these are not large amounts. Because the Russian government is still counting on the Allied troops landing in the Dardanelles to defeat the Ottomans, they will receive large-scale material assistance. They are not interested in materials that Romania will price a notch higher at the moment. However, some long-term businessmen have seen the hidden dangers behind this economic prosperity. While making profits for Germany and Austria, they began to think about the problems after the war. But at present Romania can only trade with Germany and Austria because the Black Sea Strait is currently impassable and Romanian goods cannot be shipped out. However, by the end of the year, the Romanian economy, which relies entirely on German and Austrian procurement, has reached a new level. According to government statistics, Romania's gross national product, GDP, reached 9.673 billion lei, a 26.5% increase over the previous year due to the strong demand from Austria-Hungary. Grain exports have regained the status of Romania's #1 export category. Most of them are based on grain processing factories that have sprung up like mushrooms after a rain in Romania. These factories take low-value grains, processed food or semi-finished products for profit. At present, 85% of foreign food products in the German and Austrian markets are produced in Romania.
It is these large and small grain processing factories that push grain and its deep processed products into the largest export category. The second largest category of Romanian exports remains petroleum and its chemicals. Thanks to a large number of vehicles in Germany and Austria being used for military transportation, and traditional American oil could not come in the past, only Romanian oil could be purchased. Oil is still the main force of Romania's exports this year. The total difference between oil and food is not too big, only 40 million lei. This year, the export of automobiles fell to the third place among them. The closure of the Black Sea Strait has caused the automobile manufacturing industry to lose markets in Western and Southern Europe. And because Germany and Austria imported high-priced oil, it further suppressed the desire of the two countries to buy vehicles. Now the main force of the Romanian car manufacturing industry, Volkswagen, does not have the deep pockets it had before. It can only produce heavy trucks at a low speed and sell some auto parts to relieve the pressure on the company. At present, Volkswagen factory employees have dropped from 87,000 at their peak to 79,000 now. If it weren't for the rapid wear and tear of vehicles on the battlefield, the automobile manufacturing industry would almost be unable to keep its third position. Germany and Austria have contributed to the prosperity of Romania through a large number of purchases, and Prime Minister Brătianu is also not small. So at the end of the year, in order to recognize the Prime Minister's achievements, Edel personally awarded him the Royal Knight Medal. When the medal was awarded, the Chief of the General Staff, General Prezhan, and the Minister of the Army, General Courtois, were also present to congratulate the Prime Minister. This is Edel's attempt to ease the relationship between the government and the military, which has become a bit deadlocked because of the cost of the militia. Of course, Romania's economic momentum is rising violently, so the growth of government revenue will not slow down. According to the statistics of the Ministry of Finance, in 1915, Romania's fiscal revenue reached a record high of 1.24 billion lei, an increase of 27.4% over the previous year. Among them, customs tax is still the largest tax in Romania. From this, we can see the importance of exports to Romania, which is also what Edel is worried about. Because the current population of 10 million in China cannot allow the industry to grow and develop at all. The domestic population is not enough to support the development of the economy, which will become the most urgent problem that Romania needs to solve after the war. So, with the exception of Transylvania and Bessarabia, where Romanians are the majority, taking more territory from collapsing Austria-Hungary and Russia will be the primary objective of Romania in the future. Among the rich Ukrainian granaries, Romania also needs a part. In addition to the customs tax, which has always been the first, the industry and commerce tax has been the second largest tax from 5 years ago. Especially in recent years, the industrial and commercial tax has gradually increased its proportion in the tax revenue. Now it is close to 85% of the customs tax, ranking the second largest tax in Romania. In addition to these two taxes, then there are agricultural taxes, personal income tax, value-added tax, and so on. Fiscal revenue, in addition to various taxes, of course there are other revenue, such as the paid profits of state-owned enterprises, land income and so on. These are powerful supplements to government revenue, especially the paid profits of state-owned enterprises, which account for the bulk of supplementary revenue. Now the Constanța steel plant, the Romanian chemical plant, etc., a group of state-owned enterprises that rely on German loans have all grown and grown. Although these state-owned enterprises have factors such as corporate bloat, improper management, and slow market reaction. However, relying on its rapid economic development in Romania, these enterprises have grown. For example, the Constanța steel plant, from the initial establishment of 2,400 employees, has assets of 62.5 million lei. It has grown to 5,800 employees, and has assets of 165 million lei. This is because there is only one steel plant in Romania now, and the steel it produces depends entirely on the protection of tariffs to develop and grow. Therefore, in Romania, the products of the Constanța steel plant have always been the main force used in various industries. Other steel mills are no match for the government-escorted Constanța steel mill. In fact, in addition to good economic development this year, Romania has also invested heavily in people's livelihood.
There have been significant improvements in areas such as medical care, education, transportation, and public security. These are all aspects of the people, so now the Romanian people are full of expectations for the future. This is also very beneficial for Edel's future plans. PS. I'm sorry for the lateness. This chapter has a pain in my head. It's completely a white paper on Romania's economic development. It's so hard to write. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 234 Baby Boom, Part 1. The year 1916 arrived, and it is still snowy in Romania, but people still need to run for a living. Galați, a city between the mouths of the Prut and Sired rivers, is also the last Romanian city where the Danube enters the estuary swamp. It was an important port of the Roman Empire in ancient times, and it gradually developed by exporting grain and wood. In this city, people who need work get up before dawn. Among them, Butovino also left the warm bed and got up early. Butovino, you got up so early. If you don't accompany your wife and children to take a rest, today is Sunday. The landlord, Dodomet, looked at Butovino with a tired face and asked in surprise. Butovino washed his face with the cold water to wake himself up and said to the landlord with a smile, "Today I still need to go out and find a day laborer. I hope my luck will be better." After speaking, Butovino turned his head and glanced at his dark room, as if he could clearly see his sleeping wife and children. A happy smile appeared on his face. The landlord Dodomet's reaction to Butovino was not surprising at all, and he did the same. However, his son went to university in Bucharest. When the school was on winter vacation some time ago, his son came back and preached that the kingdom needs to protect all Romanian people and they should not be oppressed abroad. As a member of the Romanian kingdom, he should also go out a force. So I plan to go to the nearest region of Bessarabia and spread this idea to the oppressed Romanian people there. This made the landlord very angry, and he was scolding his son in the face. But in the end, it is a young man. How can I let Leotzu slander his ideals? So the two father and son quarrel, and no one will persuade you. But in the end, it was Mr. Landlord who held the financial power of his son, so the enthusiastic young man did not go anywhere, and was locked in the room for the entire winter vacation. It was not until recently, that school was about to start, that Dodomet was released, and sent to the school in person. No, the landlord, Mr. Dodomet, just came back by train, and when he met Butovino, he said hello, and prepared to go back to the house, to sleep to ease the hardship of the trip. Butovino was about to go back to the room, to get a coat after washing, but just as he was taking the coat lightly, his wife Utstona suddenly spoke up. "Dono, don't you take a break today? You're already so tired at the lumber mill, and you have to go out to find work after a long break." Hearing his wife's voice, Butovino said softly, "You're awake?" "Yeah, I woke up while you were chatting with the landlord." "You also know that we have a lot of family now, and we can't support the little guy in the family if we don't work hard to earn money. Besides, you just finished the operation, and I also need to earn some money to earn back the medical expenses." Butovino had a happy smile on his face as he spoke of the little guy, who has 3 children with his wife. Among them, the newborn son was sent to the hospital for a cesarean section because of his wife's dystocia, so that the mother and child could be safe. But the operation took half of the family's savings, so Butovino decided to find odd jobs during his vacation. "It's really my fault. If not." Butovino stepped forward to stop his wife's words with his hand. He said, "It's not anyone's fault, it's God's will. Besides, we just lost a sum of money, and when we recover, we can easily make it back. Crutch and Kirstina, eldest son and second daughter, we are still waiting for us to go back to our hometown to see them." Butovino's words made his wife smile happily, and she raised her pillow and said to her husband, "My milk is not enough, so I need to buy some milk powder for my child." Hearing his wife's words, Butovino froze in his heart, but he still said without changing his face, "I'll bring a can when I come back from work today." After comforting his wife, Butovino walked out of the door and sighed inwardly. Now the price of a can of milk powder is not cheap. General milk powder costs 9 lei a can, and good milk powder can reach 2 or 30 lei. When my eldest son was born a few years ago, the price was only 3.5 lei a can. Especially in the past 2 years, the price of baby supplies has risen rapidly, as if every family is giving birth to children. Butavino just complained, and now his life is still very satisfactory to him. Only he and his wife need to work to support a family of 5, and to subsidize their parents who are still working at home in their old age. And you can save some savings, and you can buy a house in the city, and have a nest of your own in the future. In 3 decades of Butavino's knowledge, there has been no better life than now. You must know that when he was a child, it was very difficult for him and his sister to be supported by farming parents in their old home. They often starved because of food shortages. Now, as long as you work hard, you can feed your family and get your kids to go to school. In Butavino's mind, this is what the old priest in the village called paradise, a world without hunger. Butavino saw that the sky was starting to light up, walked out of the house he rented, and walked through an alley to the street. There is a bus stop 200 meters to the left of the alley, where you only need 5 to 20 barnes. 100 barnes equals 1 lei, to get to where you want to go. It happened that Butavino was going to do odd jobs, right next to one of the platforms. Butavino hurried to the bus stop to wait for the bus. Before Butavino waited long, the bus came. He squeezed into the car with the crowd, and when he walked to the conductor, the fat conductor looked at every passenger who got on the bus with sharp eyes. Butavino knew what the conductor meant, and he quickly handed her the 15 barney coins he had prepared. And quickly say your destination. I got off at the National First Hospital station. 20 minutes later, Butavino stood on the bus stop of the First National Hospital. He wiped his sweaty forehead and strode forward to the First National Hospital of Galati. This part-time job was introduced by a friend in his hometown to help the hospital build a new medical building. The National First Hospital has always been the best hospital in Galati County. Every time the government has any health funds, it will think of giving it to the National First Hospital first. So much so that the director of the Second National Hospital yelled at the health department meeting that the Second National Hospital was not under the jurisdiction of Galati. It's no use just scolding. The funds that should be given to the National First Hospital are still a lot, and the rest is allocated to the National Second Hospital. Now Butavino is going to work here for a day to earn some living expenses to support the family. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 235. Baby boomers. Next. Winter is coming, but it's still cold in Romania. At the First National Hospital in Galati, Butavino is working hard to carry bricks. The sweat on his forehead described his efforts, and the trembling legs described his exhaustion. At this time, the whistle for rest sounded, and Butavino put down his work and slumped on the brick, completely ignoring the impurities and dust on it. There is only one thought in Butavino's mind. No wonder he can get a high salary of 8 lei a day. It is really tiring. Butavino can get such a high salary now, thanks to the Romanian government. The prosperous economy has made Romania's industry develop, and many job postings are posted on the talent market every day. Most of the Romanian people work in factories, service industries, etc., and work easily. Heavy-duty construction workers are less popular. And now Romania is building everywhere, and the result of the imbalance between supply and demand is driving up the cost of construction workers. This situation could have been alleviated by the influx of war refugees into Romania, but a government ban cut off this possibility. This is also the result of the government's efforts to allow more Romanian people to enjoy the fruits of economic prosperity. Therefore, the wages of construction sites have increased significantly. This alleviates the problem of labor difficulties on the construction site to a certain extent, at the cost of increasing their cost and making the cost of construction higher. Butavino thought about his wife and children at home when he was resting, which relieved his exhaustion to a certain extent. Now he needs to finish today's work before he can get paid, and his wife and children at home are still waiting for him. In fact, the Romanian government has noticed changes in the birth rate over the years. In 1905, when Romania's industrialization began, its birth rate was 3.83%, the mortality rate was 2.47%, and the natural growth rate was 1.36%. Its natural growth rate is only average in Europe, and the only thing that stands out is the high birth rate and high death rate. Then Romania started the process of industrialization, and its birth rate increased steadily with the industrialization process, from 3.83% in 1905 to 4.21% in 1910. The mortality rate only dropped from 2.47% to 2.38% due to insufficient investment in medical facilities at that time. Don't underestimate this increase and decrease, which is also the result of Romania's annual investment of tens of millions of lei. And in that year, Romania's baby birth rate was the second highest growing country after Russia. However, Romania is much better than Russia's death rate of 3.15%. Therefore, in this year, Romania is proud of other European countries with its natural growth rate as high as 1.83%. Subsequently, the natural growth rate of Romania has been hovering between 1.91% and 1.78%. There is a change in personal opinion. In those few years, the economic development momentum was good, and many people began to think about when they were full. There is also a government push behind the scenes. Through newspapers and other media, the benefits of a family with multiple children are widely publicized, and through religion, it is announced to the world that the Lord loves every baby born. In addition, the media and religion have strongly condemned abortion, forming a social concept that having more children is beneficial. So the growth rate of newborn babies has been high. But in the past 2 years, Romanian babies have once again reached new heights. This is due to the explosive growth of Romania's economy in the past 2 years. Its growth rate of about 25% has brought not only economic growth, but also rapid social development. Among them, the birth rate has reached 5.12% in the past 2 years, and the mortality rate has also been reduced to 1.87%. Its natural growth rate has reached 3.25%. If this growth rate is guaranteed, the Romanian population can grow rapidly. But this unusual growth has also caught the attention of many sociologists, many of whom are cheering the pace of growth. Now, there is no worry about the Earth's bearing capacity in future generations. European countries are now dismissive of this great morality. Their eyes are all focused on the national strength of each country. It would not be unbelievable for more than 400 million Chinese at that time, so all countries are encouraging fertility. Even some conscious sociologists with the vision of later generations believe that population growth cannot be too high. It will not be accepted by all sectors of society. Now the mainstream view in various countries is that a perfect family needs to have multiple children, and the multiple here is more than 2. So when this statistical table of population growth was put in front of Edel, he couldn't help sighing in his heart. It's still abominable capitalism. However, high growth also brings some problems. For example, the price of food and supplies for infants and young children in Romania is now rising rapidly, putting additional economic pressure on many families. Moreover, the future involves the education of these children and the future work problems. These are all problems that need to be solved by government departments. However, these problems are insignificant in the face of future demographic dividends. As for the problem that Romania's domestic population may be too large in the future, Edel has long been at his desk, and he wants the Romanian sword to provide enough space for the Romanian people to survive. As for this sword, it is still being tempered, but it will surprise the world soon. But the first thing that needs to be solved now is that the burden on the families of new babies must come down. To this end he once again summoned Prime Minister Bricianu. I have seen your majesty. After the Prime Minister Bricianu saluted, he looked at his king vigilantly. Edel is distressed by the Prime Minister's vigilance about him. It's been almost a quarter, and the Prime Minister is still brooding over the fact that he forced him to accept the militia fee, even if he commended him for the royal order. However, it is about the young and middle-aged people in the next battle against Romania, so Edel decided to explain his intentions. First point, this summons to your excellency the Prime Minister is for the recent baby boom issue. Baby boomers. Prime Minister Bricianu did not respond to the new term in the king's mouth. It's the tidal wave of Romanian babies over the past 2 years facing Edel's explanation. Bricianu sensed it, and he asked tentatively, Your Majesty, do you want to ease the family's burden of raising babies? Yes, I have this plan. Edel secretly praised the Prime Minister's ability to quickly understand his own thoughts. Does your government department have any plans for this? Prime Minister Bricianu quickly recalled the proposals submitted by government departments in his mind. Our government believes that, in order to reduce the burden on these families, we need to start from two aspects. Among them, we need to reduce the price of baby products on the market and bring them back to normal prices. This requires government departments to guide more companies to pay attention to the market of baby products. This requires more media coverage so that companies can pay enough attention to this market. This is not bad. Edel praised. Prime Minister Bricianu saw Edel's approval and went on to say another aspect. We can also subsidize families with multiple children. The standard of subsidy is that families can be subsidized according to 60% of the basic annual cost of a baby. However, it can only be provided to families with 3 or more children. The subsidy, which will also bring Romania's birth rate to another level. So how many years will the government subsidize these families? Edel asked about the topic of his greatest concern, and it would be against his original intention to overwhelm the Romanian economy. Prime Minister Bricianu spoke out about the government's intentions. Currently, our government considers 3 to 4 years to be a reasonable number, which guarantees that the baby will survive the precarious time. The annual cost will not exceed 30 million lei, and it is estimated that the population growth will be a little higher. Hearing the Prime Minister's words, Edel nodded. He suddenly thought of an institution in later generations to take care of 2-parent worker families. Perhaps Romania would also use it. What do you think if the government runs a non-profit organization that exempts parents from bringing their children? Edel's proposal made the Prime Minister think for a moment. Is this a good idea that might spare parents the time and effort required to bring their children, like in school? Yes, but not teaching them to learn, just letting them have fun and play. Edel went on to say what later generations knew. Your Majesty, this method is feasible. Then your government should follow that plan. A few days after Edel and the Prime Minister negotiated, Romanian newspapers began to report heavily on the high price of baby products. This has forced manufacturers that had previously made high profits to lower their prices to deal with first-come competitors. In the following months, prices in the Romanian baby products market dropped significantly. At the same time, the government has promulgated the latest legislation to reward fertility. In the new bill, Romanian families with 3 or more children can apply for a family allowance, but this is only for children under the age of 4, including 4-year-olds. The bill also stipulates that each family can only receive one family benefit, and each family benefit is 300 lei. Butovino breathed a sigh of relief from the new law, which, if not too much, relieved his stress. This bill has also relieved many families who have become a burden because of too many children. In the first year of the bill, nearly 80,000 families applied for the grant. Moreover, the birth rate in Romania has increased to a certain extent after the promulgation of the bill. According to the estimation of the government department, the number of family subsidies will reach 150,000 after 5 years, which will represent a world where many young people will come to this bill in the future. At the same time, kindergartens established by the government have appeared in various cities in Romania, specializing in taking care of children from 2 years old to 6 years old. This also made the 2 worker families who were distressed by having children overjoyed, and soon the kindergartens were filled with children from various families. P.S. After the steamed buns are finished and sleep, Shiano Yowking and My Promise have been completed. Chapter 236 Verdun. While Romania is busy with the many new births, the breath of early spring has arrived in France. Here the Germans are preparing for a battle against the French army, fighting for a blow to get France out of the war. The German strategy in 1915 was a great success. Russia was repelled on the eastern front to Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. Now Russia has no threat to the eastern German territory. Serbia, which had been resisting the Austro-Hungarian army on the southern front, was also completely occupied this year, even bringing a new member to the Allies. As for Ottoman Turkey, it also repelled the Allied attack with the help of the German advisory group. So in 1915 it was completely the Allies' dominated point. The Allies, although at a disadvantage in the army to the Allies, were a different picture in terms of naval ships. Allied naval ships were suppressed in the North Sea and the Adriatic Sea by the fleets of Britain, France, Italy and other countries. Although the Allied navies relied on excellent generals to harass the Allied transport lines on the ocean, they were quickly eliminated. Now the German army will mainly focus on France, and the biggest pusher is the Chief of the General Staff, Admiral von Kenheim. He became the Prussian Minister of War in 1913. On September 14, 1914, the German army suffered a setback at the First Battle of the Marne, and the Schlieffen Plan failed. Von Kenheim took over as the German Chief of Staff and planned the march to the sea operation, intending to seize the northern French ports and cut off the direct connection between Britain and France, but he failed in the First Battle of Cambrai and failed to do his best. He advocated that Germany should focus its strategy on the Western Front, which conflicted with the Eastern Front strategy of Generals Paul von Hindenburg and General Erich Ludendorff. However, because of his position as Chief of the General Staff, the Battle of Verdun was forcibly passed in 1916. According to Admiral von Kenheim's plan, he chose to attract the main force of the French army in Verdun, and by annihilating the main force of the French army, the French government surrendered. To this end, he also made confusing deployments. In early January 1916, von Kenheim quietly assembled his troops to attack Verdun. At the same time, Germany blatantly increased its troops to Champagny, making a gesture of launching an offensive at Champagny. Zayafei, commander-in-chief of the French army, was really fooled, since the Germans were unable to conquer Verdun and diverted their offensive in 1914. The French considered the Verdun fortress obsolete, and Zayafei stopped strengthening the fortress in 1915. At this time, the movement of the German army towards Champagny made Zayafei extremely vigilant. He believed that the German army would attack Champagny and then march into Paris from here. The Germans were continuing to gather their forces quietly in the direction of Verdun. As the signs of the gathering gradually became apparent and exposed, the British and French forces finally figured out the true intentions of the German army. Verdun was the northeastern gateway of Paris and the support point of the entire front of the French army. Once lost, the capital Paris will face the German attack directly. This time Zayafei panicked and quickly ordered to send more troops to Verdun. Fortunately, due to poor weather conditions, the German offensive was delayed, providing time for France to mobilize reinforcement. France mobilized 2 divisions into the area. On this day, the Germans began to attack Verdun. The troop that received the offensive mission was the 5th Army Group under the command of the German Crown Prince Wilhelm, administered 7 armies, 18 divisions, more than 1,200 artillery pieces, about 170 aircraft, and a total of more than 210,000 people. Its 7th, 18th, and 3rd Corps, 6.5 divisions, 879 guns, 202 mortars, carried out the main assault on the 15 km wide front from Consangva to the Orne, with the 5th Corps covering its left flank. The 15th Army carried out an auxiliary assault 6 km south of the Orne, and the 6th Army carried out diversion operations on the west bank of the Meuse. In the direction of the main thrust, the German infantry was twice as much as the French infantry and 3.5 times as much artillery. In order to achieve the suddenness of the battle, the Germans carried out a series of feints on the Western Front in January of the same year. In fact, as the French commander-in-chief Zayafei, he had the opportunity to respond immediately, but because of a bad habit of his own, the defenders of Verdun were even more critical. Zayafei should not be disturbed when sleeping. He believes that a commander needs to have enough sleep in order to have the energy to deal with the ever-changing battlefield situation. So when the battle broke out that night, the French commander-in-chief Zayafei was asleep, and the messenger who sent the battle report waited dryly all night. It was not until the next morning that Zayafei, who was yawning, knew that Verdun was in a hurry. Such a slow response has serious consequences. In less than 4 days, the German army fully broke through the Verdun position, and more than 13,000 French troops became prisoners of war. On February 25th, 9 German soldiers easily climbed to the northern support point of Verdun, the fortress of Verdun. The strategic location of the fortress of Verdun was about to collapse. Paris, not far away, was red-eyed, and even the French government was preparing to move again. In the description of the newspaper at the time, it is exactly the same as before the last defeat, the Franco-Prussian War, but the real consequences are bound to be worse. If Germany takes a step forward and successfully controls the main heights of Verdun, France will either watch Verdun fall, and the gates of Paris will open, or they will throw their allied troops in, like sheep. Destroyed by Germany. At this time, Zaiaffy made the most correct choice. He arranged a new commander for Verdun, a major general named Petain. Petain, a poor child from a single-parent peasant family, enlisted in the army when he was 15 years old due to the disastrous defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, and since then he has become a stubborn temper among French officers. He always talks straight and loves to contradict his superiors. At the age of 58, on the eve of the outbreak of the First World War, he finally stumbled to the colonel. Petain himself laughed at himself at the time. I can already thank God that I can still get the colonel's pension point. But when the First World War came suddenly, Petain finally showed his skills. When Verdun was in a mess, he was decisively transferred by his boss to fill the hole. After seeing the terrible battle situation on the front line of Verdun, Petain, who suffered from acute pneumonia, immediately fell down with both eyes and black eyes. After waking up, he insisted and issued the first combat order: draw a line on the existing position. Supervising the front line, no matter the soldiers and officers of the French army, whoever retreats from this line will be shot with machine guns, and Petain's next order shocked the officers. It was necessary to organize a repair team to quickly widen the only simple road in Verdun that was not blocked by German artillery fire in 2 days. From today, the road can pass a truck every 14 seconds, supplying blood to the Verdun front. It should be mentioned here that in the transport of personnel and materials for France, there is a fleet of transport companies from Le Havre. During the blood transfusion of Verdun, 27 of its 58 Dongfeng trucks were damaged due to various reasons. After the battle, its boss, Le Havre, was awarded the Legion of Honor, command level, by the French government. The few civilians who received this level of medals, after 190,000 reinforcement and 25,000 tons of supplies finally arrived at Verdun at the first time, Petain's crossfire tactic began to shine, and he went head to head with the powerful German army. By the end of April, Petain, who was invincible, hit the Universiade. A French artillery shell accidentally hit the German army's secret ammunition depot in the Spangler forest, and 450,000 German large caliber heavy artillery shells were dumped. In an instant, it was all fried to ashes. The 42 caliber artillery that the Germans were best at bombed, and all their martial arts were abolished. The Germans planned a successful bloodletting battle, which was tossed into a tragic tug-of-war by the tough Petain. Petain, who made extraordinary achievements, was promoted to the commander of the front in May, while the French and German armies of Verdun continued to increase their troops, and fought to the death, and launched a brutal competition around the Verdun position. The troops organized at the division and brigade level were almost completely exhausted by a few rounds of artillery fire. The bloody battle continued until December, when the French army finally switched from defense to offense, and hurriedly abandoned the German army at Verdun. In the end, the French army lost 650,000, but the Germans also paid 450,000 casualties. The 10 most elite divisions on the Western Front lost all of their money. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237 National Education 1. The news of the battle of life and death between the German and French troops in Verdun was immediately passed to Edel. Facing this battle, Edel only knew that it was the most casualty battle in World War I, and the rest were almost forgotten. However, the decisive battle between Germany and France now has also eased the pressure on Romania from the side. Not everyone can calmly face all their neighbors joining the war, and they are as stable as Mount A. At least stationed in Bulgaria, the German 11th Army, led by Marshal Mackensen, is not expected to stay long. When the German army was not seriously injured, Edel did not want to face the world's strongest army now. This is not in Romania's interest, and certainly not in his interest. Edel put down Verdun's intelligence, and took out a domestic news. This is a report on the statistics of Romanian students in school, sent by the Ministry of Education, and Edel is looking at it carefully. Edel, a young man of the new century who was born in New China and grew up in Hanki, is of course no stranger to education. I still have some memories of my past life's education. The current situation in Romania has certain similarities with the motherland in the past life, so some methods in the past life can also provide some reference for Romania. What Edel is thinking about now is to use education to improve the quality of Romanian nationals and prepare for the future. Edel, who has lived in Romania for more than 20 years, has a deep understanding of the characteristics of the Romanian people. Because of Romania's fertile land, the Romanian people are not very good. From the rule of the earliest Roman Empire, to the Avars, the Slavs, the Cumans, the Tatars, and finally the Ottomans. Throughout the recorded history of Romania, the Romanians have been ruled by various ethnic groups. This makes Edel, who has the memory of the later life, a little helpless. In the textbooks of the previous life, the few times when he was ruled by other ethnic groups has always been a history of humiliation. If you look at Romanian history books, it is all about the history of all kinds of oppression, which makes Edel feel that it has become urgent to reform Romania's habits. In fact, Romania has been doing it in recent years, but they are more in the direction of nationalism. But nationalism is a double-edged sword. If it is not mastered properly, it will turn into populism, which can easily hurt oneself. So Edel has always believed that a new direction is needed, but fortunately there is a ready-made reference target, that is, the way to reunify Germany. Some people may say that the motherland of future generations is also doing well in this regard. Edel actually considered it, but in the end he gave up the idea. Because Romania does not have a tight-knit political group that works from the top and bottom, the method of learning from the motherland of the previous life is taken for granted. As we all know, from the early to the middle of the 19th century, Germany became a major European power, until Prussia unified Germany in the loosely divided Central Europe. Among them, continuous investment in education is the key to Germany's strength, and Edel also intends to take this path. However, unlike Germany, Romania has more pressure to rise. Now the development of science and technology has made the gap between European countries wider and wider. It is as strong as Germany, which can face Britain and France alone in a two-front battle, and can spare one hand to fight Russia. A weak country can only survive by relying on a strong country. Edel, who is Chinese at heart, can't stand it, and his own destiny is in the hands of others. Therefore, he needs to lead Romania to the negotiating table of the powers, to have his own seat, rather than waiting for the ruling of the powers. Then increasing investment in education will also be the main means. Of course, controlling the orientation of public opinion is equally important, and Edel will not relax either. Now Romania has 951,600 students and 15,700 teachers. The number of students has reached 10.5% of the population, and the number of students taught by each teacher has also dropped to 60.6. It was much better than Romania in the previous life, but it still fell short of Edel's expectations. You must know that Germany, which is famous for its emphasis on education, with its population of 65 million, has reached a terrifying number of 11.67 million students in the country. This would mean that 17.95% of the total population of students in school, basically covering all the German education age population. Every German is educated, which allows Germans to compete with other countries in every way. That's what Edel's education will look like, but his goals will be bolder. He intends to take advantage of Romania's current economic situation to launch 9-year compulsory education. This is not Edel's inflated desire to win the world's #1 education-focused country, but the result of his deliberation. To transform the characteristics of a nation requires long-term investment, changes in social cognition, and the guidance of public opinion. And this kind of investment can only be guided slowly. It will take decades, and now Romania can't wait for decades. In Edel's mind, World War II was the last chance for Romania's rise. If this opportunity is missed, unless Romania has a territory of 9.6 million square kilometers, a population of more than 1 billion, and a political party with super organizational skills, Only by continuing to move forward in accordance with the established goals can we achieve breakthroughs in the social pattern fixed after World War II. Romania does not have all of these, so World War II will also be the last chance point. At the same time, highly educated citizens can outperform uneducated people in whatever field of work they will be engaged in, including the military. That's where Edel thinks it's key. Although Romania now has a standing army of 400,000 strong troops, it has been trained for decades. You must know that the Romanian recruit training reaches 15 weeks, which is longer than the recruit training time of the various powers. From this aspect, it can be said that the Romanian army attaches great importance to training. But is this not a last resort, because the quality of civilian resources is not as good as that of other powers? You must know that according to the investigation of the Romanian military, the effect of German recruit training for 12 weeks is stronger than that of Romanian recruit training for 15 weeks. No matter from the technical and tactical understanding, or the understanding of military orders, they are the goals that Romanian recruits cannot surpass. This is the convenience brought by high quality citizens, and it is also the temptation that Edel cannot refuse. What's more, Romania has a population of only 16 million even with overseas ethnic groups, which is much smaller than the current population of 30 to 40 million by the foreign powers. Romania can't use the tactics of fighting against each other. Therefore, cultivating high quality nationals belonging to Romania has become Edel's top priority. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, chapter 238 National Education, part 2. However, Edel must attach importance to education, then Prime Minister Betrayal cannot bypass it. However, according to his habits, Edel's ideas cannot be stopped, and more likely to agree with the king's emphasis on education. In addition to the Prime Minister, Edel, the executor of the idea of education reform, is also very important for the candidate of the Minister of Education. Edel is not very satisfied with the ability of the current Minister of Education, Angel. This Angel has been working in educational institutions, probably because of his age, and he has always been calm and unhurried. Moreover, in the case of a substantial increase in education funding in recent years, the transcripts are not too outstanding. If the national education plan was handed over to him, Edel could hardly believe how it would be completed. Therefore, it has become a little urgent to change the Minister of Education, but fortunately, Edel still found a satisfactory candidate in the Ministry of Education. Irache Florica, who is currently the Deputy Minister of Education of Romania, is the candidate Edel is now optimistic about. Irache Florica was born in a small noble family in Buzău. His father, Irache Florica, was originally a peasant. After being made a nobleman, his father changed his current name. Although his father was a peasant by birth, he was quite visionary, sending Irache Florica and his brother to school at an early age. The two were also very competitive and went to university all the way. Among them, Irache Florica studied at the University of Bucharest, while his brother studied at the University of Iași. After finishing his studies, his brother returned to his hometown and started as a small official for the development of his family. And Irache Florica stayed at the school to teach because of his good grades. He successively served as a teaching assistant, and the professor has always been the dean. At this time, the goddess of luck favored him. At that time, the Ministry of Education was planning to introduce some school management talents, and his former teacher was in charge of this. I was deeply impressed by the former student Irache Florica, so he was recruited to serve in the Ministry of Education. Irache Florica has always been synonymous with radicalism in the Ministry of Education. He admires the German education system very much, and believes that, if Romania wants to be strong, it must start with education. Advocates to expand the scope of enrollment, and provide financial assistance to students with difficulties. What Edel appreciates most is that he also advocates that schools should use military and national education, and believes that only this way can make Romania become stronger quickly and avoid external threats. So Edel thought of him first when he needed a new minister, but for Irache Florica to be a minister, the first agreement of Prime Minister Betrayal is needed. For this reason, Edel planned to discuss with the Prime Minister, so Edel summoned the Prime Minister in the palace. Edel asked the Prime Minister about his vision for expanding the scope of education in the future. Your Excellency, what do you think of my idea? After hearing the king's ideas for huge reforms in education, Prime Minister Bricianu said thoughtfully, Your Majesty, I think this plan is still feasible, but there is one point that needs to be informed to Your Majesty. Edel spoke to the Prime Minister. Just tell me if you have any questions. After getting Edel's approval, Prime Minister Bricianu spoke. Your Majesty, I made a preliminary estimate. According to His Majesty's idea, the Ministry of Education needs at least 170 million lei every year to start this concept. However, you need to ask the Minister of Education Angela to find out how much. Seeing that the Prime Minister agrees with his ideas, just worrying about funding, Edel speaks to him. I have a solution for the high cost. Hearing that the king had a solution to the funding problem he was worried about, Prime Minister Bricianu said expectantly, Your Majesty, please speak. I plan to mobilize the Romanian people to donate money to fund education. The focus is on projects that can draw people's tears, and they need a lot of social donations. Hearing the king speak of this unprecedented move, Prime Minister Bricianu deserves no comment. Because of this, in Romanian history, there has never been a government organized educational charity. It used to be an individual or a small-scale group act, like a well-known national institution was not yet available in Romania. Seeing that the Prime Minister wasn't quite understanding about this, Edel decided to give a bombshell. If this educational charity is established, the royal family will lead the way in donations. To accentuate his tone, Edel raised a finger and spoke. The royal family can donate 100 million lei to support this institution, and will also appeal to all sectors of society to make donations to help those poor students. In addition, in order to let the world know the Romanian royal family's attitude towards education, Edel shared another idea of his own. At the same time, the royal family will also build a comprehensive university, which can also reduce the cost of students in difficulty. Prime Minister Bricianu was amazed at Edel's large-scale investment. The one-time investment of the royal family was enough for 2/3 of the first year's expenses. In particular, the initial construction of a comprehensive university was not small at all, and various construction costs were only a small part of it, and the bulk was the purchase of various experimental equipment. Therefore, until later generations, the expenditure of science subjects was much higher than that of liberal arts. Don't you see that the various universities run by the Republic of China are basically liberal arts, and it can be done with tens of thousands of dollars. If they were asked to set up a comprehensive university, it would be possible to run it without millions. In Edel's mind, this university will become a world-renowned university and a benchmark for Romanian education in the future. When others think of Romanian universities, they are the first to think of it, so this university, Edel, spared no expense. It requires well-made equipment, as well as well-known scholars and scientists. Fortunately, the current war has made it much easier for Edel to recruit scholars and scientists. Every country always has some high-end intellectuals who are tired of war. Edel's current target is these people. After the end of World War I, then scientists in Germany and Austria-Hungary who have a difficult life will not refuse Edel's call. After all, scientists have to eat and live. Even though Edel invested hundreds of millions of lei in the royal family at one time, these will not have much impact on the royal family's industry. You must know that even Edel himself is not very clear about the wealth of the Romanian royal family. That is to say, when the palace chief Viscount Edel took stock of the total assets of the royal family last month, Edel knew the specific number. Chapter 239 Country Name Education, Part 2. 1.571 billion lei. This is the asset of the Romanian royal family. Edel was surprised when he first saw the number. He had no idea that there were so many now. You must know that in 1905, Edel clearly remembered that the total assets of the royal family were only 350 million lei at that time, and now these assets have expanded to this point. Don't think it's easy for the royal family industry to have an advantage for more than 10 years, to increase by 4.5 times. In any era, assets have reached a certain point, and it is not easy to continue to expand. 100,000 to earn 1 million is a simple matter, mainly if you grasp the laws of the economy, and it is easy to achieve. But giving you 100 million to earn 200 million is an extremely difficult thing. Fortunately, the best Romanian managers have gathered in the royal family industry, so that the royal family industry can develop and grow. Now it's time to give back to the society. Edel chose a method for the royal family to start with education, which is much easier, at least in terms of winning the citizens. Prime Minister Bricianu was surprised by Edel's generous investment, but it was the Prime Minister who recovered quickly. Your Majesty, with such a large investment, I believe that the people of the kingdom will definitely remember His Majesty's kindness. As for the Prime Minister's flattery, Edel has no time to enjoy it now, and he immediately expressed his thoughts. Now that we have initially resolved the funding issue, the Ministry of Education will be responsible for the next work. However, the current Minister of Education, Angel, is a little older, and I'm a little worried about whether he can do this. The plan is too important for Romania to go wrong in the slightest point. Prime Minister Bricianu understood Edel's words. The king believed that Angel was not suitable to be the executor of this plan. For this reason, the Prime Minister started his brain to think of a solution. In fact, Angel is not a member of his party, but in order to maintain the authority of the Prime Minister and not be considered a puppet of the royal family, Bricianu does not want the king to interfere too much in the appointment and removal of government positions. Bricianu thought for a while, but he didn't think of a way to solve this problem. Whoever made the current Minister of Education, Mr. Angel, whose ability is not outstanding in the cabinet, has absolutely no reason to refute the king. Now the Prime Minister can only think about whether there may be other suitable candidates, and finally finds that he does not seem to think of suitable candidates. And Edel did not give him any extra time to think, and spoke directly. Prime Minister, I think there is a need for new candidates for the education reform package. What do you think? In the face of the king's question, Prime Minister Bricianu could only give up thinking about candidates, and replied after thinking about it. Your Majesty, your concerns are also completely correct. Only an excellent leader can lead the officials of this department to do this well, so I think it is reasonable to replace Mr. Angel. The poor Minister Angel has been decided by his fate without his knowledge. It has now been decided to replace the Minister of Education. Then a new candidate needs to be proposed. Edel is still the first to speak. Prime Minister, I think this plan requires energetic and visionary leaders. At present, it seems that the Deputy Minister of Education, the Honorable Florica, is a suitable candidate. As head of government, Prime Minister Bricianu immediately pulled the Florica Deputy Minister out of his mind. For the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Education, Prime Minister Bricianu also had to admit that the candidate recommended by the king was very good. This deputy minister has always been very radical, and he also has a deep research on German national education. In the past his aggressiveness was inappropriate, but now it can only be said that it is really suitable for Romania. Prime Minister Bricianu couldn't find any other suitable candidates at all, and if he pushed a reform plan that would disrupt Romanian education. This is also what the Prime Minister does not want to see. He is the Prime Minister of Romania, so of course there can be no obstacles to things that are beneficial to the people. After thinking so much, Prime Minister Bricianu could only sigh. The candidate recommended by His Majesty is indeed very suitable for the current educational situation in Romania, and I also recognize this candidate. Finally, Edel concluded. Since we all agree with this candidate, let's decide. The so-called news is faster than people, and the things that Edel and the Prime Minister discussed were quickly spread. It's not that the Romanian royal palace is like a sieve. Anyone who makes a decision in the kingdom will soon know. But Edda and Palmistry did not intend to conceal the need, and Edda had a careful thought, that is, to make the two camps think that Romania is still not ready to join the war. In fact, Deputy Minister Florica, the focus of the discussion between Edel and the Prime Minister, came home and knew the news that the palace was planning to make him a minister. The result was negotiated by the palace in the afternoon, and it was basically known that night. This also shows that all the forces are paying close attention to Romania's every move. Of course, his close friend made a special trip to report this news to him. He knew a thing or two about his close friend's thoughts, and it was nothing more than a good sale. However, the powers of various countries got the results they wanted from it, and the Russian ambassador Firilovsky reported to St. Petersburg. Romania's current focus is still domestic. At present, the Balkan country has no plans to join the war. The German ambassador Baslab also made the same judgment, but in the report, the German ambassador emphasized that even Romania has no plans to participate in the war at present. However, the German ambassador also added his own thinking. Judging from the various actions in Romania, their efforts to develop their own country can also be affirmed. In the future, Romania's attitude towards Transylvania and Bessarabia will directly affect which side Romania is more likely to join. Without making Deputy Minister Florica wait long, on the third day, Prime Minister Bricianu adjusted the position of the Ministry of Education. Angel, the former Minister of Education, will be transferred to the National Development Association as the president, and his post will be taken over by the former second Deputy Minister of Education, Florica. It should be mentioned here that the National Development Association is a very high-level government agency. Its chairman is equivalent to the ministers of other departments, but although the level is high, this association is completely a staff organization, and its ability depends entirely on whether the members can get the Prime Minister's attention. However, at present, I'm afraid that most of them are elderly people, and many people said that this association is a nursing home and private. At present, I'm afraid that this criticism will be confirmed from the actions of the Prime Minister. PS. Tomorrow morning, everyone will be watching the 2 shifts, and it will be posted on the 14th ahead of time. Because the wife of the steamed bread will come up, so I have to finish writing it if I stay up late. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 240 Education Reform Plan. 1. As the saying goes, changing people is like changing knives, and this sentence is not too exaggerated for the new Minister of Education, Florica. Before Florica became a minister, he was called to the palace before the excitement period passed. Edel wanted to hear personally about the candidate he chose, and whether he could understand his intentions in the palace. Edel looked at Minister Florica in front of him, listening to him talking about his plans for future Romanian education in high spirits. That's why I think Romania's education is now the best in the Balkans. Whether it's the quality of teaching, the number of students and the level of national education, we Romania are well deserved first. But I think these are still it's far from enough. We are still too small. Edel had listened to Minister Florica's description of the current situation of Romanian education before, and now he asked with great interest when he heard about the future education plan in Romania. Then what are you going to do? Seeing that the king was very interested in the planning of his future education, Florica spoke with vigor. I plan to reform the current education sector, in which the bloated departments will be divided, and each department has its own work in charge. If there is any problem, the responsible person can be directly found. And the current school curriculum should also be redivided to join military training courses, so that every student can strengthen his body and learn to obey basic orders, Minister Florica said here. And seeing that Edel was still very interested, he continued to express his bolder thoughts. I found that in the students' textbooks, the situation of Romanians under foreign occupation is always vague. I think this is very wrong. It will give students a wrong view of history, which needs to be corrected. Minister Florica said that he stopped here, and Edel understood what he meant. This is to greatly revise the Romanian history book and revise some points of view. At this time, Edel felt a little inexplicable, and suddenly he thought that this was not what Nan Bang did in his previous life. Thinking of this, Edel decided to specifically ask the Minister of Education in front of him what he planned to do. For the arrogant and sensitive nature of Nan Bang people, this is not what Edel wants. If you really want to educate the people into this kind of character, it is better for him to commit suicide and re-travel. Then what are you going to do? Minister Florica, who did not understand the thoughts of the king in front of him, spoke out what he had been thinking about for a long time. Your Majesty, I intend to make a detailed description of the lives of Romanians who have been oppressed by aliens since the Roman Empire. The main purpose is to arouse the students' sympathy for the tragic fate of their ancestors and hatred of foreigners. Then focus on a certain level of beautification of the insurgents who rebelled against these regimes. That's it. For Edel's inquiry, Minister Florica nodded. Your Majesty, that's all I can think of right now. Edel breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Minister Florica did not map out the frontiers in the history books or snatch the cultural traditions of other countries. He also hated the historical pride that Nan Bang had done in the previous life to expand territory and snatch the cultural traditions of other countries. This kind of thing is the most likely to trigger national confrontation. In this era of the law of the jungle, it might be a war. Edel is not afraid of war, but definitely does not want to fight such a war. And it's going to be bad for the Romanians too. No one likes a historical thief. He definitely wouldn't do it this way. Point 4. Minister Florica. Edel is still quite satisfied. As for the future, it depends on what step Minister Florica can do. Now he will tell the professional about the education reform plan that he has discussed with the Prime Minister and let him see if there are any loopholes in the plan. Point Minister Florica. I called you here this time, not only to hear your vision for the future of Romanian education, but also because of a comprehensive reform of the Romanian education system. Point hearing the king's words, Minister Florica was refreshed. Your Majesty, please speak. Point Edel will discuss the plan with the Prime Minister and give a detailed description to the Minister of Education in front of him. It was very touching to hear that the King and the Prime Minister invested so much money in Romanian education, which made the new Minister Florica feel a lot of pressure. Point he also understands that the King and the Prime Minister put this matter in his hands, which means that he is fancy. Of course, if he doesn't do it well, he can imagine the consequences. It's just that he is very motivated to be able to realize the dream he pursues in his hands. So after Edel finished speaking, Minister Florica said excitedly, I would like to thank your Majesty for your high regard for me. It is my lifetime honor to complete this plan. I swear with my life that this reform plan will definitely meet His Majesty's requirements. Seeing the education minister, whose face was flushed with excitement, in front of him, Edel said comfortingly, it is because of your consideration that I put this plan in your hands. I don't need your life, I just need your excellency to complete this matter, which is the best reward for Romania, and everyone will remember you. With the encouragement of the king, Florica, with years of experience working in the Romanian Ministry of Education and Schools, pointed out several deficiencies in Edel's plan. Edel humbly accepted this, and at the same time, let Edel see the difference between professionals and him. Point the biggest problem is the 9-year compulsory education prepared by Edel. In Minister Florica's view, this is indeed a good way to change the training of Romanian talents. It's just that the time is premature and Romania lacks teachers who can teach such a large secondary school. Teaching secondary schools is no more demanding than teaching primary schools. However, the current teacher training institutions in Romania, the normal schools, are completely unable to meet its requirements. Minister Florica suggested that the enrollment scale of normal schools can be increased, and some poor students with excellent academic performance can also be recommended to normal schools without charging various fees for the time being. However, the condition is to sign a contract with the education department, requiring him to teach in public schools for 8 years, and his school expenses can be gradually deducted from his salary. Edel also accepted Minister Florica's professional advice. However, an alternative solution has been found in his mind. It doesn't matter if there are fewer teachers. When the time comes, they will be recruited from Germany and Austria, which can always be temporarily up to Romania's own number of teachers. Chapter 241 Education Reform Act, Part 2. After meeting with Edel, Minister Florica returned to the Ministry of Education and immediately carried out vigorous reforms. Many incompetent people were transferred from key positions, and departmental responsibilities were divided in detail. The main thing is to promote the promulgation of Romania's new education law, in which the education of school-aged children is mandatory. Every Romanian child must be educated, and parents of school-aged children who do not receive education will be fined. If the child is still not allowed to receive education, he will be sentenced to imprisonment for up to 3 years. At the same time, the Ministry of Education has begun to expand the enrollment scale of secondary schools. At present, there are 897,500 primary school students and 41,700 middle school students in Romania. The ratio reaches 21.5 primary school students to have 1 enrolled in secondary schools to continue their studies, which is higher than the 10 common in all powerful countries. 1 primary school student is admitted to middle school, which is too low. Not even prominent in the Balkans. This has a lot to do with Romania's previous use of a large amount of government finances for the military, and now Edel intends to correct this mistake, mainly by having money to invest in education.
So now Romania has invested heavily to redeem its previous mistakes, of course. In addition to compulsory education and expansion of enrollment, the Ministry of Education has established a nationwide charity organization to subsidize students in need, called the HO Project Student Fund. Don't ask who got it. The fund also accepts national donations and has donation points in all major Romanian cities. And in order to reassure the public, the HO project will also be under the supervision of the royal family, and its accounts will be checked every year on the second day after the establishment of the HO project. Queen Sophie Mary donated a huge sum of 100 million lei on behalf of the royal family. This attracted a lot of coverage in the Romanian media, and some people called Queen Sophie Mary the Messiah of Romania. Other nobles and wealthy people also followed the news and donated generously, and then drove the Romanian people to donate. In the first month of its establishment, Project Hope received a total donation of 194.3 million lei. This surprised the officials of education, and they all talked about the importance that the people place on education. It's just that Minister Florica sees it very clearly. At this time, there is an atmosphere brought by the royal family. If the annual donation can reach 1/5 of the current total amount after deducting this month, then he should be secretly happy. A year later, it turned out that Minister Florica was right. At that time, the HO project was deducting the donation for this month, and only 28,819,647 lei was received during the year. Of course, the Romanian royal family will not only donate money, and then Edel announced in the name of the king that the royal family will build the best comprehensive university in the country in Galati. There will be a reduction in fees for students entering this university, and for some students who are really difficult, the school will completely reduce their fees after the investigation is true. Construction of the university, however, has only begun, and it will take 2 years to enroll students. This caused the middle school students who were still studying to have a lot of discussions, and they all planned to wait until they applied for the school to try point with the royal family's 2 major educational moves in a row. Let the Romanian people feel the kindness of the royal family. For a time, the prestige of the royal family reached its peak, and people all over the country said that God had sent them a wise monarch. Edel is very satisfied with the attitude of the people, but he notes that gratitude is time sensitive, and it may be these people who will abolish the royal family in the future. Of course, Minister Florica did more than that. Then, the Ministry of Education ordered the preparation of a new textbook on the grounds that the textbook had reverie, focusing on history textbooks. During the compilation, the editors, instructed by Minister Florica, greatly revised the humiliation process of the Romanians under the rule of other races in history. In order to impress the students, the editors also added a few short stories to it. One of the most impressive is Michia's noteboard, which is a daily thing written on the board by a girl named Michia who lived in the 13th century. This wooden board records the short life of the girl. From the earliest records, historians know that this Michia was writing daily life from the age of 16. It is recorded on it that they seemed to be daily life at that time, and even had companions. The girl was thrown into the wolf and fed to the wolf because she was offended, which made the Romanians in later generations feel humiliated. At the end it records that Michia said that the Hungarian master was going to sell them to buy new girls, and they were going to fight. If she succeeded, she would come back to get the board. Obviously, Michia didn't succeed, because the beloved plank is no longer recorded. It is a pity that it is made up of the fact that the Hungarian nobles are cruel and inhumane, but the Hungarians have performed much better in history, but they are not as eye-catching as this story. Of course, the story of Mitria was also written by the editors of Minister Florica. As to why he did this, it is necessary to ask King Edel. In fact, Edel only mentioned to Minister Florica, and it is necessary to emphasize the period of Hungarian rule. But I didn't expect that these editors would write such a tearful story. But this is what Edel hopes to see. He now needs the Romanian people to gradually hate their Hungarians, because in the next few years his main target is Hungary after the disintegration of Austria-Hungary. Moreover, Hungary and Romania have always been feuding in the original time and space, mainly due to territorial disputes. In this life, Edel believed that he should get more benefits from Hungary, so he didn't care about hating Hungary. Besides, the Kingdom of Hungary still oppresses the ethnic minorities.
Now all the ethnic minorities are miserably oppressed by them. Even after the First World War, other ethnic groups in the Crizana, Banat, and Maramureș regions near Transilvania would rather join Romania than stay in Hungary, which could be voted on at that time. And after the disintegration, even the Germans in the above-mentioned regions were in favor of joining Romania. This shows how much Hungary has failed on the minority issue point. As soon as the newly written history textbook was published, it caused a lot of controversy. Some people say that the Romanians are written so miserably on this that they cannot accept it at all. Or people say that many of the textbooks have not been confirmed, so how can they make a conclusion like this? However, all these remarks are irrelevant to Minister Florica, who is in charge of the writing work. What he needs now is for every Romanian student to be able to read the humiliation in this book and use public opinion to induce them to think that only if the country is strong can they be safe from danger. However, judging from the effect after a few years, Minister Florica's purpose has been achieved. Chapter 242 New Tanks, Part 1. Romania's education reform plan is a riot in its country, and almost all Romanian people are cheered by it. During the implementation of this program, many families with financial difficulties have benefited from it, and many students with strong learning ability but poor family conditions have the opportunity to continue their studies. Of course, in addition to reforming education, Romania has not forgotten its own army. Now the army is the key to Romania's true neutrality point. The breath of spring spreads in Ploiesti. At the train station, several passengers from Constanța who got off the train in Romania's fifth largest city. It is indeed much colder here than in Constanța. One of these people was the first to comment on the temperature. Bioac, don't complain about the weather. It's not that you don't know that the weather in Constanța is the best in the country. Look at Wang, he doesn't complain. These people are obviously the tracked armored vehicle technicians led by Hulk, Wang Cheokiang, and Bioac. They are also the best tank design experts in Romania at present. They have designed one, but Edel gave the drawings and took the 5-ton heavy truck as a parent body. This time I came here mainly to learn the rational use of tracks from the Ploiesti machinery plant, which produces tractors. The last time I designed a tracked armored vehicle, the three of them were tired and crying. Because of the unfamiliarity with the track design, there were various problems at the beginning, but it was fortunate that the support of the machinery factory could make the tracked armored vehicle meet the design requirements. And this time, the three of them came here because they didn't know enough about track design before, so they made a special trip to learn. False, because they have another task, and this time they came to ask for help as well. It needs to be mentioned here that Mr. Wang Cheokiang, who has dual nationality of the Republic of China and Romania, because the design of the tank was granted nationality, has no intention of returning to China for the time being. Because of his disappointment with the chaotic situation in the country, Wang Cheokiang gradually matured from a hot-blooded young man. Since the founding of the Republic of China, I have to ignore it and return to China. Two friends, I finally persuaded him to complete the task and go back, and now I do not plan to return to China for the time being. This is all his disappointment with the domestic political chaos and the people's hardship. Among them, the skills he currently masters also account for a certain factor that he can't use them when he returns to China. While the three were talking, the person who had come to pick them up from the Ploiesti machine factory also saw them. Long time no see for the three of you. The three of Hulk heard the voice from behind, turned around to see their faces, and hugged happily to greet them. Sodival, I didn't expect you to pick us up. After separation, Sodival also spoke with a smile on his face. Yeah. As soon as I heard it was you, I made a special trip to meet you. The leader Hulk also joked with a smile. I would like to congratulate you. I heard that you are already the deputy director of the machinery factory. I'm really happy for you. It must be very good to be the deputy director. In the future, you will definitely be the Ploiesti machinery factory become a world-renowned company. At the end of last year, with the strong recommendation of his father-in-law Puto Ricu and his own ambition, the 27-year-old Sodival became one of the deputy directors of the machinery factory. Now he is the youngest leader of the machine shop, and many privately say he will surpass his father-in-law in the future. Because he was only promoted to deputy director, Sodival is now mainly responsible for the research and development of new products. Facing Hulk's joke, Sodival quickly waved his hand and said, "How can it be so fast? I'm only the lowest ranked deputy factory manager now, and there is still a lot to learn. Where is the future goal? I don't know yet." Point after Sodival answered Hulk's words. He said to the three, "Let's go to our factory first. I've already made arrangements. I won't go home tonight if I don't get drunk." Point regarding Sodival's words, Bayak joked, "We have no problem. It's you. I don't think it's possible." Point Wang Cheokiang did not forget to make up for it. "If it's too late, Hestina will probably be angry." Point I already said it this time, and she agreed. Sodival answered them first, and then spoke to Bayak viciously. "Bayak, this time, I must take revenge, and I must drink you under the table." Point "Come on, let's see who is lying on the table and calling for mom." Point Bayak responded to Sodival, not forgetting to provoke him with his eyes. Seeing the cockfighting expressions of the two, Hulk and Wang Cheokiang laughed beside them. Point afterwards, the three of them took the other entourages of Volkswagen to the machine shop in the vehicle, arranged by Sodival. Point. In order to communicate with each other, the four of them squeezed into a Model T, and on the road, Sodival smiled to the three people in the back row. "Look at your factories, cars are sold to our factory." Point Bayak replied with a smile. "Passenger cars don't use our factories. Do you want to drive your factory's tractor?" As soon as he lifted the tractor, Hulk's heart moved. Thinking of a message he heard, he asked Sodival, "I heard that your factory has designed a new heavy-duty tractor." Hulk's words also caught the attention of the other two people in the back row, so everyone was waiting for Sodival's answer. Turning his head to look at the expressions of the three, Sodival said without concealment, "Yeah, we've only just built a prototype car. You know it. It's well informed." Point Sodival said the new tractor was part of the ambition of his father-in-law, the director of the Puto Riku factory. The machinery factory manager is no longer satisfied with only producing agricultural machinery and equipment. He intends to enter the transport vehicle. It's just that people's impression of transport vehicles now is that Volkswagen's 1.5 ton and 5 ton trucks. Therefore, Putos Riku intends to take advantage of the machinery factory and start by transporting from the countryside. Point his idea was also strongly supported by Professor Diesel, director of the power laboratory. The inventor of the diesel engine was also not reconciled that his invention could only be used in rural areas on a large scale. So the two hit it off and finally developed this new tractor. It is clear that Volkswagen has always taken intelligence on emerging power vehicles very seriously. That's why the machine factory produced a prototype car, something that even Hulk, who is a middle-level Volkswagen, knows. Sodival, one of the deputy directors of the machinery factory, had long expected this, so he admitted it generously. Point anyway, Volkswagen is also powered by gasoline engines, and Ploiesti machinery plant is completely like a power system, and it is not afraid of its defenses. Because this new diesel-powered tractor is indeed suitable for areas with complex terrain. Point after a few people drove to the machine shop, Sodival did prepare a sumptuous dinner for them. The three of them and the technicians of the machine shop had a great time drinking, but Sodival didn't complete his revenge. He lay down under the table again, but this time he was not alone, and Bia was lying with him. Neither of them is a winner. Chapter 243 New Tanks, Part 2. This is our new tractor. Sodival pointed to a large tractor in front of him and said to the three, "Yesterday's wine fight didn't have a big impact on the young people. Today, the three of them visited the new products of the machinery factory under the leadership of Sodival. It's not at all to say that there is no impact. Originally, they planned to visit in the morning, but because they had a good time yesterday, they could only visit in the afternoon." Point Bayak, who had been drinking wine last night, looked at the tractor that had not been painted and was still shining with metallic luster and praised it. "Really not bad." Point as the leader of the three, Hulk was most concerned about data, so he asked, "Can I ask about the data on this tractor?" "Sure." Point after Sodival replied, he began to introduce the data of his tractor. This tractor is 4.25 meters long, 1.6 meters wide, 1.7 meters high, and 3.05 meters long. The power is a 4-cylinder 80 horsepower horizontal diesel engine developed by Professor Diesel. I believe you are familiar with this diesel engine. It's not unfamiliar. We are all familiar with it. Wang Cheokiang answered Sodival. They only used this diesel engine as the power source for the tank last year, and of course they know the basics about this diesel engine. The tractor can go 35 kilometers in the mountains with a full load of cargo. Hulk said fairly. Very good product. Bayak didn't speak, but he gave a thumbs up, meaning the same thing. Sodevil saw the performance of the two, and when he was happy, he planned to show them something new. We are developing other products based on this tractor. Do you want to see it? Certainly. Then Sodevil led the three to another workshop, and he spoke to the three on the way. When we designed this tractor, we were ready to extend it to other types. For example, bulldozers, excavators, etc. are all new products we developed based on this diesel engine. So this 80 horsepower 4-cylinder sleeper type diesel engine is the key to the development of our machinery factory. Hulk heard Sodevil's implication, but couldn't help but ask. So, you're going to continue investing money in research and development on diesel engines? Why not? Sodevil turned his head and asked Hulk. Seeing that Hulk didn't answer, he continued. Our collaboration with Power Labs will continue, and the only question now is how well it sells, which will determine our continued investment. Hearing Sodevil's ambitious words, the three couldn't help but think of the Volkswagen factory. They have dominated the European car market for years with the Model T and 2 trucks. In the past few years, a 5-ton heavy truck has been developed. If the outbreak of the war had not stimulated the sales of trucks, especially the 5-ton heavy truck that can travel on complex terrain, regardless of sales, only in terms of research and development, Volkswagen has been mediocre in recent years, which makes the three feel heavy. But the trio soon put their concerns about the Volkswagen behind, as they walked to another workshop and saw a tracked vehicle. This is what they need to care about for the three people who are now on the task of developing a new tracked combat vehicle. Now I just look at the best tracked vehicle factories in China. What can I learn from? This is the bulldozer we developed. Sodevil pointed to the crawler bulldozer with a thick shovel head in front of him and said, this is the bulldozer we developed. The belt bulldozer was successfully developed by American Benjamin Holt in 1904. It was formed by installing a human lifting bulldozer in front of the crawler tractor. The power at that time was a steam engine, and then it was successfully developed by natural gas driven gasoline engine driven crawler bulldozers. Bulldozer blades are also developed from manual lifting to wire rope lifting. And the bulldozer invented by Benjamin Holt caught the attention of the director of Portus Ricu, who had been considering the types and sales of the machine shop's products. He could see the role of this machine in engineering infrastructure at a glance. He estimated that the market for this machine was definitely not small, so he also asked the machine factory to develop a machine to compete with its counterparts in the United States. This tractor is a lot better than Holt's own factory. First they swapped out the wire mounts for structural steel rivets, which made it more sturdy, and they swapped out the power for a diesel engine. But for the three, these are secondary, mainly because the bulldozer is equipped with a unique suspension system. Independent cylindrical coil spring suspension system. The machinery factory installed an independent cylindrical coil spring suspension system on this bulldozer, which was originally intended to prevent the tractor from shaking too much during work, resulting in the fastest running bulldozer. When Sodevil introduced the interesting facts about the suspension system, the three couldn't help but want to drive it for themselves. I'll let them show you. Sodevil complied with the requirements of the three, and he hired a test driver to drive it on the proving ground. The three of them were stunned as they watched the fast bulldozer running on the complex test site. Look at it driving through the dirt pit without slowing down. One of the three, Bayak, yelled at the bulldozer speeding in the proving ground, and the other two behaved similarly to him. Don't blame the trio for such a big reaction, mainly because they were wounded by the suspension system of the first tank. On the first tank they designed, the three directly used the non-independent suspension of the car, which was the rhythm that the members of the tank would want to vomit. They also have no other way, and the funds given do not allow to redesign a suspension system, so the 37 shotgun on the tank is not allowed to be 300 meters away. And because it is a non-independent suspension, it is easy for the tank to have various small problems during driving, which is also because it is not an independent suspension. Now they are looking at an independent suspension system that could be used on a tank. How could they not be excited? and it seems that this suspension system can make the tanks they design easily meet the requirements of the military. But before that, you need to ask the reliability of Suodable's suspension system. Thinking of this, Hulk asked Sodable beside him, "Is this car's suspension reliable? So far we haven't found a problem. Why do you guys want to use this suspension system?" In the face of Sodable's inquiry, Hulk said without hesitation, "Yes, we would like to use it in the new tracked armored vehicle. Can you introduce this suspension system?" "No problem." Suodable told Hulk the main principles and data of the independent cylindrical coil spring suspension system. Standing next to him, Bayak and Wang Cheokiang raised their ears and listened intently to Suodable's explanation. When they heard that the principle is to convert the vertical motion of the road wheel into the expansion and contraction of the spring, and the resulting elastic deformation provides a support force for the car body, they could not help but admire the technicians of the machine shop. Who would have thought that it is just a change of thinking, that is, to make the tracked vehicle with this suspension system fly like a fly. For this reason, the three of them even thought that this time was the right one, and that they should have come to Ploiesti several times. PS, Mom, I feel that my title is wrong, so let's just forget it. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 New Tanks, Part 2. In fact, this time the military, mainly Lieutenant Colonel Hoffman, did not have high requirements for the new tanks. In fact, it is Pioneer. It is also the name given by Hoffman, which means that this new weapon expands the way of fighting. The upgraded version of the tank is mainly aimed at reducing the failure rate of the tank. Therefore, the three people who had no idea in Constanta came to Constanta to try their luck, but they did not expect to meet them. After listening to Sodable's introduction to the independent cylindrical coil spring suspension system, all three felt that this was what they had been looking for. All three feel that the structure is very simple, the reliability is very good, and the elasticity is also very good. This suspension system can make the tank have good performance. As for its outstanding shortcomings, it takes up too much space inside the car body, and the three people also feel that this is tolerable. Because Lieutenant Colonel Hoffman has asked the three of them more than once since he received these tanks to improve the failure rate of the tanks. The failures caused by the suspension system currently account for half of them. The three of them were forced by Lieutenant Colonel Hoffman to try their luck at the Ploiesti machinery factory, a major manufacturer of tracked vehicles in Romania. After the three of them encountered a problem that could solve the suspension system, they planned to go shopping in the machinery factory to see if they could gain other benefits. Sodable is also quite supportive of their work. After all, he can be regarded as his friend. And if they can make excellent new equipment, it will also give the machinery factory a new way out. After all, the military's orders can't just be given to Volkswagen to manufacture tracked vehicles. Their Ploiesti machinery plant is the specialty. The three continued to visit the Ploiesti machine factory, which really gave them a lot of inspiration. For example, when designing the Pioneer tank, they still use the same variable box front as wheeled vehicles. In the machinery factory, they found that most of the variable boxes of their tracked vehicles were rear mounted. They asked the designers of the machinery factory, and the answer was that the rear mounted variable box can facilitate maintenance, reduce the vehicle height, reduce power loss, and allow the engine to exert greater performance. However, the disadvantage of this is also obvious, which will lengthen the car body and is not conducive to operation. There is no way for the body lengthening machine shop, but for the situation that is not conducive to operation, they use a hydraulic control system to change this situation. Because they produce civilian vehicles, there is no situation where people stay in the body of the vehicle. Therefore, whether this plan can be successful on tanks requires three people's demonstration. The trio were most interested in the benefit of lowering the car's height. Because the current Pioneer tank is already high enough 3.48 meters. If you want to add independent cylindrical coil spring suspension system to them, the height is estimated to be 4 meters. The three of them are also people who have designed tanks. They know that the increase in height not only requires more armor, but also causes the problem of poor terrain adaptability, so they are of course interested in technologies that can reduce the height of the car body point. In addition to the discovery that the variable box is post-fixed, their machine shop has other gains. Among them, the rear-mounted driving wheel is another major discovery of them. Because the Pioneer tank is transformed from a wheeled armored vehicle, its power is also the same as the armored vehicle, using a front engine design. In order to facilitate power transmission, its power wheels are also front-mounted. In the machinery factory, they found that many of their tracked vehicles have power wheels at the rear. After inquiring, they found out that it is because the structure is compact and does not occupy much space, and there is no complicated front wheel steering and driving structure. However, the disadvantages and advantages are obvious. The rear axle load is large, and there will be a tendency to oversteer in terms of handling. After a period of deliberation, the three of them believed that the shortcomings of the tanks they developed were not obvious. After all, they were not producing speed sports cars but combat vehicles, and they were not responsible for handling problems. The main problem now is that the tank failure rate is too high, and the rear engine and power wheels can optimize its structure to reduce the failure rate. For the three people who have been trying to reduce their failures, this is a drowsy encounter with a pillow, which is not very good. So the three immediately decided to use the same layout in the new tank. After spending 5 days carefully understanding the various technologies suitable for their own use in the Ploiesti machinery factory, the three also became more and more confident in the new tank indicators required by the military. The three of them are also very aware of the help given by their friend Sodevil. So before leaving, the three invited the Sodevils to a dinner party to thank them. Several people are having a farewell lunch at a French restaurant in Ploiesti. Hulk picked up the red wine in his hand and said to the Sodevil couple, "Thank you for your help to the three of us. If it weren't for the full support of the machinery factory, we would not have achieved such a big harvest." After Hulk finished speaking, Bayak and Wang Cheokiang also raised their wine glasses to express their respect to the Sodevil couple. In the face of the three tributes, Sodevil and his wife Hestina also paid tribute to the three. After drinking the glass of wine, Sodevil told the three of what his father-in-law asked to bring. "You study this tank for a vehicle with this weird name. I think the Ploiesti Machine Works is actually the best choice. Because this is a secret equipment developed by the military, Sodevil is also very interested in replacing it with special vehicles in public." Without waiting for the three to reply, he continued, "Have you found it? Our Ploiesti machinery factory has the most experience in the development of tracks for this special vehicle, and our machinery factory has the most experience with the diesel engine you need. Basically, what you have developed, all kinds of this special vehicle, can be found in our factory with technicians in this field." Sodevil concluded. "So I think it's the best choice for you to come to our factory." In fact, Sodevil has always felt this way, but the purpose is different from his father-in-law's desire to connect with the military. He is thinking of himself and his three friends. If the three friends were developing wheeled armored vehicles, he would not have raised this question at all. It's just that their research is really in line with the mechanical factory, and he can't bear to let the three go back and forth for this. Hearing the friends' words, the three of them couldn't help being silent. In fact, the three of them also felt this way, but now they are transferred to the Ploiesti machinery factory, which makes the three of them feel uneasy. They are also afraid that because of their departure, Volkswagen will have their own gossip. After all, the three of them have learned a lot from Volkswagen, especially in terms of technology. If they leave like this, they will be talked about, and the three of them are thin-skinned. Faced with a quiet scene, Sodevil is the most experienced. He spoke immediately. "Let's not talk about that now. It's just a gathering of friends today." It was Hulk who was the most experienced. He immediately answered, "Yes, that's right. Today we only talk about parties, about life. To us, we only talk about parties, about life. Looking at the expressions of the three friends, Sodevil knew that his words had left a mark on their hearts, and that was enough. In the future, their choices also need to be decided by themselves. After several people finished their lunch, Sodival sent 3 friends to the car. Looking at the slowly moving train, his wife Hestina asked, "Will they come to the machine shop?" Sodival replied, "Should be, but not now." Chapter 245 KARATURIN-039 S Ambition. When Hulk and others returned to Constanta from Ploiesti with a huge harvest, the Minister of Industry Caraccioli was busy working in his office. For Caraccioli, these 3 years have been the most relaxing of his tenure as industry minister. There is absolutely no need for government departments to supervise, and now every Romanian citizen with spare money knows what to do. In fact, looking at Romania's economic development in recent years, Caraccioli has not done much work. He is aiming at Romania's current economy and guiding the society from the government. At present, it seems that the effect is not bad. Romania's economic development has been very good in recent years. Now that the government's job is much easier, Caraccioli has begun to look elsewhere. Up to now, he is only an ordinary high-ranking Liberal Party, and he wants to develop further within the party. In fact, he has learned a lot from his uncle Stulia, and he has learned to plan ahead. So he needs to be one of the liberal giants now, or at least one of the future prime ministers within the Liberal Party. Then you need to be one of the liberal giants. At least you need to get other high-level party members to agree with his views. But Caraccioli has a huge advantage in this regard. That is, he can get the king's support from Edel. As the support of the real king, Caraccioli is very aware of how important it is to improve his status in the party. Because his uncle told him more than once. Caraccioli, without the support of the king, you cannot be in charge of an important sector of the Romanian economy. It does not deny your ability, but it is more because of your attitude towards the king's instructions. Caraccioli thought that what his uncle said was very correct. He was very aware of his abilities. If it weren't for the strong support of King Edel, he would not even be in charge of an important department, let alone become the head of a marginal department. Under normal circumstances, he is now a deputy to a certain minister, waiting for the minister to step down for various reasons, and then compete with a group of competitors for the position. Therefore, to be able to seize the current opportunity, Caraccioli believes that the influence of the first meeting between himself and Edel is very important. He can be said to be one of the main means for the king to intervene in the government. Now that Caraccioli wants to get rid of one of them, then he needs to have a higher position in the Liberal Party, and those who are useful can become pawns. And Caraccioli wants to be the most useful one. Because he knows that, despite the fact that Prime Minister Bricianu and King Edel are getting along very well, this is a compromise between the two sides because of the external war situation. In fact, the Prime Minister is very dissatisfied with the king's encroachment of many powers in the government. Now it is just because the king's prestige is too high and there is nothing to do. As long as the prime minister is given a chance, he will be the first to jump out against the king. As for the king, it is also because at present only the prime minister can do a good job of relations with the Entente. Let Romania remain neutral when there is war all around, and only tolerate some of the prime minister's small actions. Among them, the prime minister's ability is also a reason. But that's not the main reason. You must know that his uncle Stulia is not famous for his ability, but his obedience is the main reason why he has been in the prime minister's position for 10 years. He is very aware of the king's temperament. This is not a monarch who can be controlled by others. Therefore, he believes that in the future, the prime minister and the king will definitely be the first to be unable to bear each other. And of course he was on the king's side because he didn't think the prime minister could shake the king's position in the hearts of the people. At that time, it is not that he has no chance to be the prime minister. But first of all, you need to improve your position in the Liberal Party significantly, and now you can do it yourself. When Caraccioli was planning for his future, his secretary knocked on the door and came in to speak. Minister, Mr. Kling is visiting. Invite him in now. Bruce Kling is now a low-ranking undersecretary in the Ministry of Water Resources, which is not why Caraccioli hired him. The reason why he really pays attention is that this Mr. Kling is also a quasi-higher-level Liberal Party, and he is also a Liberal Party person who is very dissatisfied with Prime Minister Bricianu. The process of saying that they have a grudge is also very routine. It was when Kling was competing for the top ranks of the Liberal Party that Ekan Bricia, the leader of the party, believed that Kling was not competent enough to do high-level jobs. He then nominated his cousin Wendell Bricianu himself to be one of the top liberals. This made Bruce Kling very angry, thinking that he had been insulted, so he kept making trouble for the leader of the Liberal Party, Econ Bricianu. Just because its status is not too high, the threat to Prime Minister Bricianu can be ignored, so it is not too concerned about it. However, his actions also made the Prime Minister's faction extremely annoying, so after the Liberal Party formed a cabinet, he was only given the post of a lower-ranked deputy minister, and it was still a very unimportant department. Now Carachuri has summoned him to see if he can pull him to his side and strengthen the strength of his faction. After the secretary brought coffee and left, Carachuri spoke to Krillin, who was sitting in front of him. Krillin, I heard that you went to trouble the Prime Minister again. Kling, who has a rosy nose and a plump face, took a sip of coffee and said while reclining on the sofa, isn't this unsuccessful again? Hearing Krillin's words, Carachuri was going to pretend to persuade him. It's not good for you to do this. You still won't make you feel better if you keep making trouble with the Prime Minister like this, and your strength is completely unable to deal with the Prime Minister. I think this matter will be temporarily stopped. Hearing Carachuri's words of persuasion, Krillin stood up from the sofa and looked at Carachuri coldly. If you want to be a lobbyist, then I don't think it's necessary to stay, and I don't think it's just a matter of myself and the Bricianu family. After finishing speaking, Krillin got up and walked towards the door. Just as he was about to open the door and leave, Carachuli's words stopped him. If you really want revenge, you'd better sit back. Krillin turned to look at Carachuli, who was still sitting in his seat, and asked, what do you mean by that? I said it very clearly. If you really want revenge, you'd better sit back. In the end, it was the hatred for Prime Minister Bricianu that made Kling sit back. Only then did Carachuri speak. If you follow your method, don't even think about revenge in this life. Kling was also a political figure and immediately understood Carachuli's intentions. Do you want to deal with the Prime Minister too? I don't mean to deal with him. In fact, you only need to think about the people who can make the Prime Minister deal with him, and you will know what to do. Kallin thought about it in his mind and said suddenly, you mean the royal family, taking advantage of his doubts, he continued. But so far the king has not shown his dissatisfaction with the Prime Minister. Seeing that Krillin's brain is not stupid, Carachuri continued to induce him. What's the situation in Romania now? The economy is doing well. What about the surroundings? There is war around. Krillin understood immediately. There is war all around, and the king has no idea of changing the Prime Minister for the time being, so you're not threatening the Prime Minister at all now, and the best thing to do is to disgust him now. The real chance is to wait until the war is over. Krillin looked at Carachuri up and down. Will you support me when I say that? Carachuri took a sip of the coffee in front of him and said slowly, this possibility is not ruled out. But first, he needs to lose the trust of the king, and he also needs you to join me. Hearing Carachuri's undisguised words, Kling said after thinking about the pros and cons. No problem, but you will give me a ministerial position at that time, and you can't be too unpopular. No problem. After reaching an alliance agreement with Kallin, Carachuri watched the door closed as he left. He now has a very deep understanding of Kling. No wonder Prime Minister Bricianu said that his ability is not enough. This is true, and he is too greedy. As for the conditions he agreed to, let's wait for him to withstand the counterattack of the Bricianu family. That's right. Kling was the bullet he was looking for, a bullet aimed at the Prime Minister. But whether he can shoot in the future depends on the situation of His Majesty Edel, and now he is just raising funds before it rains. PS. Regarding politics, I just want to summarize it with a sentence from Tezu. There is no party within the party, the ideology of the emperor. There is no faction within the faction, and there are all kinds of strange things. Politics is dirty. If you keep yourself clean, don't play politics, because you can't afford to lose. Chapter 246 Romania 039 S Temptation 1. Prime Minister Bricianu is now completely unaware of Carachuri's actions. Even if he knew about it, he would not have any worries about Carachuli's actions. Because Romania's rapid development is completed in his hands, and he is destined to be included in Romanian history. The records of later generations about this period of time did not circumvent the possibility of him at all points, so now Prime Minister Bricianu's vision has been placed on the situation in Europe, and he is completely disdainful of those sneaky conspiracies in the country. Prime Minister Bricianu has a kind of confidence in me now. It was the ambassadors of Britain, France, and Russia who gave him this confidence. Now Germany is fighting to the death in Verdun and France, and both sides have tried their best. In order to alleviate the passive situation of France in Verdun, the British also plan to counterattack the German forces. Even Russia, which was severely injured last year, was forcibly dragged into the war by Britain and France. In the spring of this year, the Russian army of up to 2 million people launched a counterattack against Germany and Austria. Now the German and Austrian armies and the Russian army are fighting fiercely on the Polish plain. According to the latest information received by Prime Minister Bricianu, the Russian army Lutsk defeated the 4th Army of Austria-Hungary. Now the Russian army's breakthrough in Austria-Hungary is in sight. Under the command of the new Russian Commander-in-Chief Brusilov, the Russian army has formed many breakthroughs in the Austro-Hungarian defense line. It seems that in this war, the Austro-Hungarian army can only regain a little confidence in Italy. Now every force of DIA is being used to the limit in each battlefield. If Romania joins the war now, then no one will be able to defend them. Prime Minister Bricianu was a little moved, and he thought this was the best chance for Romania to enter the war. At the Prime Minister's residence, Bricianu is discussing with his cousin, Wendell Bricianu. What are the conditions they are giving now? In the face of his cousin's question, Wendell, who has been in charge of secretly contacting the ambassadors of Britain, France, and Russia, replied. The conditions given by the ambassadors of the 3 countries have loosened. They no longer only give the Transylvania area as a reward, they have begun to agree to some of our other territories' demands. They agreed to which areas would be assigned to us after the war. The Barnet area and Salish of Krishana to the east of Sebish belong to us. Prime Minister Bricianu immediately found the above position on the map behind him, and this time the concession of the 3 countries was still relatively large. This is a territory that will be as large as 20,000 square kilometers, and there are also nearly 1 million Romanian, Hungarian, German, Serbian and other ethnic groups living here, but there is still a big gap from his requirements. In this life, Prime Minister Bricianu, with Romania's 400,000 excellent army and 400,000 strengthened reserves, offered the condition that all the east of the Tisza River should belong to Romania. The 3 Entente ambassadors were stunned by the Prime Minister's appetite. This is to push its borders to the Hungarian plain, and also to seize a lot of its plain areas. The main reason is that, if the Romanian Prime Minister's conditions are agreed, its population will double immediately, and its territory will also expand by 1.2 times. This is really a big opening point. Although Prime Minister Bricianu put forward such unpleasant conditions, the ambassadors of the 3 countries did not close a door to negotiations, but were testing Romania's bottom line bit by bit. However, Prime Minister Bricianu remained unmoved and insisted on his own terms. Because he saw the reality of the 3 kingdoms clearly, and now the 3 kingdoms need Romania's admission, and it is also his trust in the Romanian army. This is not Romania, which has never been prepared to join the war in the previous life, and can only rush to war. After 10 years of military preparation, the current Romanian army can be said to have reached the same level as the foreign powers, and even surpassed the armies of various countries that have been fighting for 2 years in some aspects. In terms of weapons, equipment and training, the Romanian army is stronger than Russia and Austria-Hungary, not to mention other small countries. Therefore, Prime Minister Bricianu can put forward conditions that satisfy him. Cousin Wendell looked at Prime Minister Bricianu, who had been staring at the map, and after a while of inner struggle, he said, "Cousin, is it really okay for us to negotiate terms in private like this?" Looking at his cousin's worried face, Prime Minister Bricianu said with a smile, "Why are you worried about me?" Yes, Wendell has also been in the government for a long time, and he is very clear about who can make Romania's decisions now. So after my cousin found me, I was very worried about negotiating with the allies, for fear of angering Edel, who was actually in power in Romania. Now he finally couldn't help but ask his cousin about the doubts in his heart. Hearing his cousin's concerns, Prime Minister Bricianu decided to explain it to his cousin. Joining the Entente is an opportunity for Romania, and we are in a pretty good position. Mainly, Do and our neighbor Bulgaria have no energy to take care of us. As long as we cross the Transylvanian mountains, we can enter Hungary directly. Planes. By that time, Austria-Hungary said that there is no force that can stop our progress. Prime Minister Bricianu said that he has a full understanding of the future war situation. In fact, this is not what he came up with. This is the plan for the war against Austria-Hungary, explained to Edel by the Chief of the General Staff, Prician. In addition to Austria-Hungary, in fact, Prician also explained the country's plans for Russia and Bulgaria. Their general staff has already made a lot of combat plans for neighboring countries, but these plans are all placed in the combat staff point, and Bricianu had a deep understanding of Austria-Hungary's combat plan, so in front of his cousin, he also did not forget to imagine his dream of commander-in-chief. Cousin, you know, I'm worried about our actions now. Wendela didn't care about his cousin anymore. He explained the words directly. If the king finds out that we are in private contact with the Entente on the terms of the war, it will be a disaster. It will be a disaster for our family and for the party. Seeing that his cousin made it clear, Bricianu did not interrupt him. He looked at his cousin and said seriously, "You think the king will not know our actions? You must know that the head of the royal guard, Karist, is his eyes and ears. The head of the guard receives a lot of government funds every year. What do you mean?" The cousin said that he thought of a possibility and immediately looked at his cousin with wide eyes. Prime Minister Bricianu understood what his cousin wanted to ask, but he did not give an answer. There are things that can be done, but cannot be said, and this is the state of Prime Minister Bricianu right now. Chapter 247, Romania, 039's Temptation, Part 2. Edel has long known about the Prime Minister's private contact with the Entente bloc. In fact, even Prime Minister Bricianu's contact with the Entente is also behind him. Moreover, the conditions proposed by the Prime Minister were passed to him through the Chief of General Staff, Ploiesti, because Admiral Priest spoke to him quietly in his meeting with the Prime Minister some time ago. He would support Romania's participation in the war if the Allies could give the conditions east of the Tisza to Romania. Prime Minister Bricianu was very surprised by the Chief of General Staff's statement. Anyone who has a preliminary understanding of the political situation in Romania knows that Admiral Pri is the king's spokesman in the army. Moreover, this general of Ploiesti is usually very cautious, and he never expresses his opinion on matters other than the army easily. If you can get the chief of staff to express his attitude, then it is obvious that someone is telling himself through his mouth. As for why you don't tell yourself, you need to comprehend it yourself. However, Prime Minister Bricianu has a good understanding and quickly guessed the intention. This is because he does not want to disturb too many people, and this is mostly a test for the Entente. Then let the person standing behind you say it, because there will be no room for turning around. That's why Prime Minister Bricianu asked his cousin to act as a liaison in person. At present, this kind of test is also very beneficial for Romania, because it can understand the attitude of the Entente countries towards Romania's participation in the war, and lay the foundation for future real negotiations. In fact, after Romania revealed its intention to join the Entente, it was an unexpected surprise for the Allied powers, who were already showing signs of fatigue from the war. However, the three countries also had different attitudes regarding the conditions for Romania's participation in the war. As far as France is concerned, with the German army in Verdun's life and death battle, they think they can continue to talk about Romania's conditions. If Romania could flank the German-Austrian underbelly, the war would have ended in a victory for the Allies, and Russia is firmly opposed to Romania's conditions. Unlike history, Romania's conditions overlap with Russia's conditions this time, in the Carpathian Mountains and parts of Galicia, and there are also parts of Banat's conditions with Serbia. Regions overlap. As a greedy polar bear, of course, he doesn't want someone to grab meat from his bowl. Therefore, Russia's request for Romania is that the conditions for the overlapping part must be revised. As for Britain's conditions for Romania, it believed that Romania's ambitions must be suppressed, and too generous conditions should not be given to it. The United Kingdom is considering the future post-war pattern. If Romania benefits too much from this war, then the Balkans will still not be peaceful. After eliminating the different requirements of the three countries, they all agreed that they could continue to negotiate conditions with Romania. So the longest negotiation in World War I began, but no one in the three kingdoms thought of it. Ambassadors of the three countries and Wendler in Romania, they became the liaison in the middle, and they kept passing on each other's conditions to their own governments, and Edel, who was staying in the palace, was also paying attention to this. Because of the negotiation that he initiated. Your Majesty, this is an entente condition from the Prime Minister. The captain of the bodyguard, Karist, put the negotiating content secretly obtained from the Prime Minister on Edel's table. It is said that it was obtained secretly, but the Prime Minister did it on purpose. This is a tacit understanding between Edel and the Prime Minister on this matter. Kalu, just leave it here. After Edel raised his head and replied to his head guard, he continued to care about the family situation of the head guard. Is Vimia feeling better? Karist told Edel truthfully. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your concern. She is much better. The doctor said that she will be fully recovered in half a month. This Vimia is Karist's wife. Yes, our captain of the bodyguard is married. In the first 2 years, Edel saw that the captain of the bodyguard was still single, and he didn't care about his personal problems at all. So I mentioned it to my wife Sophie Mary, and asked her to pay attention to whether there was a suitable girl for the captain of the guard. Sophie Mary is also very keen on finding a wife for a captain of the bodyguard. She originally planned to match the personal maiden and Callis to date. However, neither of them had feelings for each other, so Sophie Mary could only find another way. At a court party, she discovered the gentle Vimia, so she introduced the two to each other, and the result was that Miss Vimia became the wife of the captain of the guard. It was only a while ago that Vimia had a serious illness, so Edel asked about it. But Edel just asked with concern, and after getting the answer from the chief of guards, he picked up the conditions that the allies gave to the prime minister and looked at it. Barnet area and Salisht of Krisana to the east of Sebis, now all of Temis County, all of Kalash County, east of Adela County, southeast corner of Beha County. For the benefits now given by the allies, Edda would not be satisfied if it was the final conditions for participating in the war. However, this is only the first concession from the allied camp, and Edda thinks it can be negotiated. This time, Edel hinted that the prime minister had his own considerations in testing the conditions of the allied powers, because he wanted to know whether his many movements in Romania had affected the progress of World War I. If Germany suddenly exploded and crushed France on the Western Front, Edda's plans for Greater Romania would be in vain. But it seems that Britain and France are still the same as in the previous life, as always, withstood the German offensive on the Western Front. This can be seen from the responses of the three countries to the Romanian conditions. If the war situation is critical, then the three kingdoms must agree to Edel's conditions without hesitation. Now negotiating with Romania, because the conditions are too large, indicating that the three countries are confident to block the German offensive. This is also good news for Romania. After all, no one wants to join the war on an unfulfilled offer. Now Edel thinks it's okay to continue talking, but it can be delayed for a while. Because so far, he hasn't figured out whether he should attack Red Russia. Edda has been considering this issue in private, and the emergence of Red Russia can maximize the interests of Romania in World War I, but considering its strong organizational ability, World War II will also become a hurdle that Romania cannot overcome. But in order to prevent the Red Russia from appearing, in terms of Romania's strength, it is necessary to use its milk feeding power. This will prevent Romania from gaining enough interest in the First World War. This is sacrificing the interests of Romania to benefit the entire capitalist world. Edda is not so sentimental now. Therefore, Edel is also undecided about the time to participate in the war. But now we can slowly discuss the conditions first. As for when Romania will join the war, we need to wait for Edda to make up his mind. Chapter 248 The Bornage, Part 1. While Edel was in a dilemma, the war in Europe continued. On the Western Front, in order to support the French troops struggling at Verdun, the British attacked the Germans along the Somme. In order to prepare for this battle, the British and French coalition forces gathered a total of 32 infantry divisions and 6 cavalry divisions, 2189 artillery pieces, 1160 mortars, and about 300 aircraft. Its main purpose was to break through German positions, transforming them from positional warfare to mobile warfare, and to relieve French pressure at the Battle of Verdun Point. The biggest impression of Edel in this battle is that many people died. Markin killed 60,000 British troops in one day, and the first appearance of the tank was on the battlefield. The British didn't spend as much time developing tanks as Romania. After the outbreak of World War I, Lieutenant Colonel Swindon, who was serving in the British Expeditionary Force, proposed it. There was a need to create an armored vehicle that could open roads, climb ditches, and destroy and suppress machine gun fire on a barbed wire battlefield, thereby speeding up the course of the war. However, the British Army at that time had no interest in this, but Churchill, who was then the Secretary of the Navy, immediately ordered the formation of the Land Warship Committee to personally lead the development of the Land Warship Point. In August 1915, the world's second tank was born in Britain. Unlike Romania's Edel guidelines, the British-produced Mark I tanks are not outstanding in performance. It seems that it is more emergency production, which is also related to the British positioning of new weapons produced by itself. At that time, the Mark I tank had a diamond-shaped outline and rigid suspension. There were protruding gun mounts on the crawler frames on both sides of the car body. The tank crew of 8 people, there are male and female too. The males are armed with two 57mm Hotchkiss 6-pounder Rapids and 4 Hazakis machine guns, while the females carry only 6 Vickers machine guns. Such a crude tank in Ed's view still shocked the German army. When a dozen gigantic steel monsters roared, their tracks clanged, smashed through barbed wire, flattened bunkers, and fired at the enemy with machine guns and artillery, the Germans were terrified. Into the cover, some escaped. The British infantry, supported by tanks, spread out their attacks on the frontal area of 10 kilometers wide and advanced 4 to 5 kilometers in 5 hours. This result used to cost thousands of tons of artillery shells and sacrifice tens of thousands of people to get it. British troops occupied the lost bunkers without many casualties, capturing lost machine guns and artillery pieces. One of the tanks captured a village without firing a shot, while another captured a trench and captured more than 300 German soldiers. When the German command received the report from the front, it was greatly surprised. They ignore the machine gun fire for this kind of ability to climb over trenches on the battlefield. In fact, they rely on lumber to fill the trenches, but the tanks still failed to climb over them. Intrigued by the new weapon that can move, but the priority is to find a solution, when a staff officer mentions an intelligence. This weapon is already in the Romanian army, so the military sent a message to the government, hoping to get this new Romanian weapon soon. Even if you can't get the real thing, at least you have to have drawings. So the German government handed over this task to Edel's old friend Ambassador Baslober, who is now watching the secret diplomatic telegram from Berlin. Hey, this task is not easy to handle. After reading the telegram, Ambassador Baslob sighed to himself. As an ambassador in Romania for several years, Baslob believes that he still has some understanding of Romania's political situation. Regarding Prime Minister Bricianu's recent frequent contact with the Allies, he also heard some rumors, so he believes that Romania has begun to choose a team. It's just that after his analysis of Romania was sent back to China, it was lost. However, even if it is not easy to do, Ambassador Baslob believes that he must contribute to the motherland. So after reading the telegram, Ambassador Baslob called an embassy worker, go and prepare the vehicle for me, I'm going out. After instructing the staff, Ambassador Baslob began to think about where to open the breach. It is not easy to get the weapon blueprint of a neutral country. The former firing coordinator, Ambassador Baslob, later believed that it was given to them by Romania on purpose. Otherwise, there is no way to explain why Eder agreed so readily. At that time, he almost thought that Romania had to choose a side first. But unfortunately, in hindsight, he thought too much, and Romania still maintained its neutrality. When Ambassador Baslob thought of this Berlin request, Council Amas now rushed over in a hurry. Our people have just seen again that Minister Ventil Bricianu has gone to the British embassy. This is the third time this week, and the Romanian government must be talking to the allies about something. Point in the face of the affirmative words of Councillor Masnow, Ambassador Baslab had to let go of the idea of Berlin's demands. He asked back, is this real? Of course. The military attaché of our embassy, Major Hubbards, saw it in person this time. Councillor Masnow made sure that Ambassador Basroba walked back and forth in the room thinking. A minister or the prime minister's cousin frequently visited the embassies of the Entente countries, which must have its own unknown reasons. Asking the Romanian side directly is absolutely not acceptable, and Romania will not tell the truth. Getting the news through Romanian friends. The problem is that I don't have enough reliable friends at the top of the government. Ambassador Baslab pondered several ways in his mind, but they were all rejected by himself. Councillor Masnow couldn't help suggesting as he watched Ambassador Baslab's thinking as he walked back and forth. How about we start with the allied embassies? Ambassador Baslab heard the words of Councillor Masnow and asked, do you have any good candidates? Councillor Masnow knew that it was Ambassador Baslab asking him if he had a suitable acquisition. Now think about getting the news of Romania and the Entente contacts through Romania is currently unlikely, because Romanian officials are very high level and their embassy can't afford the price. However, it would be much simpler to bribe the staff of the embassy of the Entente. After all, their level is much lower, so it is also easier to bribe them. Ambassador Baslab just asked casually, but he didn't expect that Councillor Masnow really gave him a candidate. At the moment I have a candidate. Who? Andy Kaidanton, Councillor of the Russian Embassy. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 249 The Bornage, Part 2. The antecedent mentioned by Councillor Masnow. Ambassador Baslab is also acquainted and has met several times at the diplomatic gala. However, because they belonged to two opposing sides, they never talked. I just know that this Mr. Antecedent was sent to Romania last fall to replace the old councillor who was not in good health. Can this candidate work? Of course. Ambassador Baslab knew the status of the councillor in the embassy, who was the second person in the embassy under the ambassador. Therefore, he felt a little weird about the candidate proposed by Councillor Masnow, so he confirmed it again. We have carefully learned about this Mr. Antecedent, and we found that his reputation in the foreign ministry in St. Petersburg is not very good, and he likes to be nostalgic in the place of fireworks. However, because he embraced Rasputin's power, he was arrested, appointed as the councillor of the Russian embassy in Romania. And according to the grapevine, the wife of Mr. Antecedent seems to have had an affair with Rasputin. For Rasputin, the favorite of the Russian court, Baslab is no stranger even in Romania. For this magic stick from Siberia, his experience is even better than the protagonist. He was born in a peasant family in Siberia, Russia, and his father was a gambler in his early years. Rasputin himself became a problem boy in the eyes of his fellow villagers as early as a teenager, drinking and making trouble, stealing and rogue. Rasputin is the nickname everyone gave him, which means lascivious and debauched, and then everyone gradually forgot his original name. In his 30s, Rasputin met Orthodox pagans who believed the only way to get to God was through crime. This allowed the troubled teenager to open the door to a new world, and he started his career as a magician, with the unique skills of spreading prophecies and performing miracles. Later, he was lucky to prophesy the March drought somewhere in Russia, and cured the dog of the Grand Duke Nicholas, the uncle of Nicholas II, so he became famous. Rasputin used the divination and spells he learned from nowhere to easily win over a group of nobles, and became popular in the whole high society. The Russian emperor at that time was Nicholas II, and Queen Alexandra believed in mysticism, and liked to entertain such figures as monks, holy children, prophets, prophetesses, and saviors. So the troubled boy succeeded. Later, Rasputin also miraculously stopped the bleeding of Alexei, the son of Nicholas II, who suffered from hemophilia, which made the emperor and his wife worship him, and Rasputin began to walk sideways in Russia at that time. Rasputin's daily life is just two words: lewd, often spiritual with many women. It is said that he slept all the aristocratic girls and ladies in Russia at that time. Therefore, Antecedent, who can have an appetite for Rasputin, will have a very exciting private life. The candidate proposed by Councillor Masnow seems to have no problem with Ambassador Baslab. Go ahead and prepare. I'll give you 40,000. No, 60,000 lei. We must find a way to pull it into the water. After thinking about it clearly, Ambassador Baslab asked Councillor Masnow to pull this Mr. and Desidenton into the water. For Ambassador Baslab, even if he can't find out the content of the talks between Romania and the allied countries, it is absolutely worthwhile to buy a councillor from an enemy embassy, because there is not much Russian foreign policy can hide to the level of the councillor. After instructing Councillor Masnow, Ambassador Baslab was ready to go out. Now he needs to solve the task that Berlin sent him and find a way to get the drawings of the Romanian tracked chariot. Of course, it would be best if Romania can provide the real thing. But Ambassador Baslab believes this is unlikely unless Romania is no longer going to be neutral. Edel looked at Ambassador Baslab in front of him and asked again, "Your Excellency Ambassador, you are sure that this is a request from your country? You should know that Romania is a neutral country and we cannot violate its principle of neutrality." When Ambassador Baslab heard Edel's words, he didn't say a word in his heart, saying that he didn't mean to sell the aircraft shooting coordinator last time. However, he would not say what was in his heart, but instead spoke more humbly. "Yes, Your Majesty, this is the condition our government wants to make." Edel said it bluntly. "It is impossible for us to agree to your request. You must know that Romania will not violate the law of neutrality, so you see the heart of death." Hearing Edel's direct refusal, Ambassador Baslab was not angry. He knew that this new weapon was too large, and he was psychologically prepared for Romania's direct rejection. But he will not give up like this. This time is mainly to let Romania know that Germany is very interested in this new weapon. After Edel sent off Ambassador Baslab, he picked up the table and got information about the Battle of the Somme himself. He was also very confused about whether the tanks should be given to Germany. From his heart, he hoped that Germany would let Britain and France shed more blood on the Western Front and let them have more experience in licking their wounds after the war. But at present it seems that the inertia of history is still strong, and his butterfly's damage to Britain and France is still limited. In fact, this is Edel's illusion. In this time and space, he has already caused a lot of extra damage to Britain and France. The British and French have lost more than 100,000 people than in the original history. This can be seen from the fact that the United Kingdom changed the volunteer system to the conscription system in November 1915, which was more than 2 months earlier than in history. But these were not understood by Edel. In the face of Germany's request, Edel now intends to discuss with Ploiesti, and military matters still require military experts to solve. Your Majesty, I think for Germany's request, we can refuse, but in order to ease the relationship with them, we can find a way from the drawings and designs. After hearing Edel's statement about Germany's demands, Admiral Ploiesti explained it to the king word by word. In fact, he didn't know what to do with Germany's request. He could only speak according to the previous king's attitude towards Germany. Seeing the hesitant Admiral Ploiesti, Edel knew that he was asking the wrong person, so he switched ways. "So do you think it's a threat to us by handing over part of the design to Germany?" Hearing Edel's military inquiry, Prezhan said without thinking, "No, this threat can be ignored, because we only handed them some drawings, and they didn't have time to study it carefully." Edel decided to ponder over the words of Prezhan. "Okay, I'm thinking point at a time." When Edel fretted over the German demands, another plan by the German embassy was on track. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 250 The Spy, Part 2. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Bucharest's bustling nightlife began. Even if the surrounding countries were fighting to the death, this could not stop people from having fun. In the Rhodes nightclub, the largest nightlife venue in Bucharest, 2 infrequent guests came in. If you look closely, you will find that one of them is Councillor Masnow, but he has already put on makeup. Those who are not familiar with him are definitely not familiar with him. Impossible to recognize. The other is an employee of the embassy named Boltz. Because of his rich private life and his rare diplomatic occasions, he was brought in by Councillor Masnow as a candidate to approach and Desidenton. Councillor Masnow spoke to Boltz again, just in case. "Remember, you're a Romanian grain merchant named Helk, who lives in Alexandria. I'm the only one at home. Because the price of grain is soaring now, I buy grain from my hometown and sell it to those processing companies. Now I'm coming to Bucharest to seek stimulation. I can go back and forth. So you can rest assured. The grain merchant named Hulk used this method to successfully make Councillor Masnow stop his desire to continue talking. The two found a corner where they could see the door and were not easy to find. Have a beer and a Blue Danube. Councillor Masnow expressed the needs of the two to the scantily clad waitress who came over. Okay sir. Seeing Hulk staring at the waitress leaving, Councillor Masnow doubted his selection this time. Can this Bolts really accomplish the task he entrusted to him? Should I send a report to Berlin and ask it to send more professional people over? Completely unaware of his actions, Bolts, who made Councillor Masnow feel that he had chosen the wrong person, turned his head and preached to him. I really envy them Romanians. We fought to death with the allied countries in our motherland. They only need to produce materials to earn our money. Hearing Bolts' words, Councillor Masnow scolded in a low voice. Shut up. Your name is Hulk now. You are a grain merchant. Stop talking about these stupid things. You should be very satisfied with your life now, and you can't wait for the war to continue. Do you understand? Bolts, who was reprimanded by Councillor Masnow, changed quite quickly. Thanks to this war, I made money. This war should go on forever. After they chatted, and Dizzy Danton came in as usual. Since he was transferred to Romania as a councillor, he quickly adapted to the life here. The nightlife here. As for work, he and Ambassador Firilovsky made a clear division of labor on the first day of his arrival. He is mainly responsible for some small things, such as the embassy needs to be repaired, vehicles need to be purchased, and even supplies need to be purchased, etc. He generally does not ask about other things. Ambassador Firilovsky is still very responsible and is willing to send a councillor who doesn't care, so it is a good choice to change the councillor for these things that can get some oil and water. So the two quickly reached an agreement protocol. Since then, Andy Danton has lived a happy life, and this Rhodes nightclub is his favorite place where he can find a lot of fun. He was in a good mood today because 2 more vehicles of the embassy broke down, which is another income. As for why the vehicles of the Russian embassy broke down so fast, we need to ask the councillor. After seeing an Dizzy Danton coming in from the door, Councillor Masnow told Bolts he had been waiting for a while. As we agreed before, I can't appear in front of him in case he recognizes me. No problem. Hulk took 2 sips of wine and spilled a little on his body and then stumbled towards Andes Danton, looking like a drunk person. After finding the seat, Andy Danton was about to sit down when he was bumped by someone unexpectedly. He turned his head and looked over. Isn't this the Hulk businessman? Seeing he bumped into someone, the drunk told Dizzy Danton, I'm sorry, I bumped into you. How about I treat you to a drink as an apology? And Dizzy Danton looked at the drunk in front of him, and he didn't care about being bumped. No, just pay more attention next time. In the face of Andy Danton's generosity, the drunk man still said relentlessly, no, I must buy you a drink, and what I said in Hulk must be counted. In the face of this kind of hospitality, and Dizzy Danton didn't want to be too troublesome, and it was also the kindness of others, so he agreed. Okay then. Bring me 2 glasses of the Blue Danube I just drank. The drunk man said loudly to a waitress next to him. He and Councillor Masnow had learned about the wine here before. The Blue Danube was considered to be the most expensive wine here, so he let the pseudonym Hulk order the wine to show his financial resources. All his clothes, including his outfit, were specially arranged, which cost thousands of lei. So Andy Danton and he got to know each other over wine. From the mouth of the drunk, Andy Danton knew that he was a grain merchant named Hulk, who specialized in purchasing grain from various places and sold grain processing factories in a centralized manner to earn the difference. He just made a big deal, so came here to celebrate. The two were having a good time chatting over wine. At the time of parting, the Hulk businessman spoke to Dizzy Danton. It's okay to play here once or twice. It's not as fun as a place I know, and it's not expensive. As a person with a rich private life, Andy Danton asked with interest when he heard this. Do you know there's more fun in Bucharest than here? This place I know is not in Bucharest. It is in the suburbs. Many ladies like to go there to find excitement. Hulk glanced at the Rhodes nightclub and said contemptuously, This place is for ordinary people to play. Who would the real aristocrats come to play here? And Izzy Denton asked in a heartbeat when he heard this. Can you take me to see it? That's not possible. There is a membership system there, and it needs to be introduced by others. And I need to pay a membership fee of 30,000 lei every year. I was only introduced when I was doing a big business. Hearing this, and Izzy Danton's heart was like a cat's claws. I also have the membership fee of 30,000 lei. Can you introduce me in? Hulk, who knows how to run long lines for big fish, said. Next time, I still have a business to do. You can leave a phone number for me, and I can call you then. No problem. After finishing speaking, Andy Key Danton wrote the phone number of his embassy on a piece of paper and handed it to Hulk. Councillor Masnow, who was observing from a distance, saw that Anders Danton handed a piece of paper to an employee whose pseudonym was Hulk and knew that his first step had been successful. Next, we need to prepare this membership-based private club, but just in case, we need to ask Ambassador Baslab to get a little more funding. In fact, the plan prepared by Councillor Masnow is very simple, that is, to use beauty to seduce and Izzy Danton to take the bait. At present, it seems that this ancient strategy is still very effective. Please remember this book's first domain name, mobile version reading website, end of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.